great.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll be.
All right, we're going to keep score. Mm-hmm. Yep. I can do that. Thank you, Brett. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the West Fargo City Commission meeting for Monday, July 20th. I'd ask at this time that you rise and join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The commission meeting agenda has been distributed. Next order of business is the approval of the order of the agenda. Is there any discussion on that, commissioners?
A little long, but I will motion to approve.
Your point is well taken, Commissioner Gjerdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as distributed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item C, the approval of the minutes of June 22nd, 2020.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gjerdevig. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of June 22nd, 2020. Pages 3 through 5 as distributed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item D is the approval of the minutes of July 6, 2020. As distributed, it is on pages 6 through 8.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Gjerdevig. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of July 6, 2020. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business, building permits.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits report as distributed. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next order of business is a consent agenda, and it is items A through E. Has been distributed, runs from pages 9 through 34.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented in the packet, pages 9 through 34. Is there any discussion?
Just want some clarification on
Please.
items B and C. With our approval of this, does that approve those events, or just that it would be possible to have those open containers?
I would assume that we're approving it contingent on those events happening, but if they don't happen, obviously.
I just wanted to
That's
make
my
that
understanding.
I just want that clarification out there.
Thank you, Commissioner. Item B is the approval of the public liquor consumption for the 2020 West Fargo Street Fair and approval of the public liquor consumption during August and September cruise nights. For the public's knowledge, that's what we're talking about here. And that is, Mr. Shockley, I'd look towards you. That is if these events are held dependent upon where we're at with the COVID-19 discussions?
That is correct, Mr. Commission President.
All right. That answer your questions,
Yes, it
Commissioners?
does.
All right, very good. We have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. The consent agenda is approved. The next order of business for the regular agenda is item number 1, and it's a discussion for the funding of the Workforce Safety Academy, North Dakota State School of College and Science. Commissioner Gjerdevig asked that we bring this back and have a revisit on it. Commissioner Gjerdevig.
I'm not sure I asked to have it back, but I'm certainly open to the conversation. Our motion, and just to correct, the agenda says Workforce Safety. It should be Workforce Academy.
Yes, sir.
The motion that we passed 2 weeks ago effectively died based off of what Fargo did. So I think there's just a discussion as to how to move that forward.
Would you like to recant that, or would you like me to do it? Please.
Well, the motion from 2 weeks ago was that the city of West Fargo would contribute $800,000, which was less than what was initially being asked.
1.25.
If Fargo increased the contribution that they were being asked to, so that it was more proportionate to, based off of our population differences between our cities.
Thank you. Okay, so the fact that our motion was contingent on a larger contribution by the city of Fargo per capita, as was discussed. So our dollar amount of the $800,000 is now a moot point due to the fact that Fargo contributed $1.5 million. As an update, the Cass County Commission has agreed to their portion at $5 million. The city of Fargo has went at $1.5 million, and Fueling the Future has went at $1 million. That took place last Wednesday. That presentation was made before the Fueling the Future Board of Directors, of which I serve on that. So the discussion this evening is first part of the discussion is West Fargo going to participate? And obviously the second most important part of that, at what level would we participate? Now, part of the discussion that the school officials have brought forward is that the city of Fargo and the city of West Fargo have the same size school districts. Last fall, and the second week of the opening of schools, Fargo had 12 more students than the city of West Fargo, only 12. So we were still in third place. We fully anticipate that, dependent upon how things come out this fall, that West Fargo will have several hundred students, probably more than the city of Fargo, this coming school year. So we're equal in size with student population. Obviously, the communities are different sizes. We do. Travis from GIS in the city of West Fargo did a study for me and a while back, and he when he plots the cities and the city of Fargo and those people that live in the West Fargo school district, live in the city of Fargo but live in the West Fargo school district, he estimates between 39,000 and 41,000 people. So, our population base is always identified for the city of West Fargo at 39,000. So in reality, we have a population base in our school district of about 75 to 80,000. So again, the question at hand is, at what level should the city of West Fargo participate at? Commissioners?
I just have a quick comment. So when you talk
Commissioner
about West Fargo and Fargo having the same amount of students, to me that makes a lot of sense that the school board's contribution would be the same. But when it comes to how much our city is contributing, I feel like we should be a third of whatever Fargo is. If Fargo just voted for 1.5, I'd be more comfortable at 500. I'd be more comfortable than that, than the 800 that we originally voted on. That's just personally where I'm at.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Commissioner Simmons?
Mayor, one comment I'd make also is that after they left us, they, like you just mentioned, they went to Fueling Our Future and got $1 million. Well, that's our money too, folks. We supported that. So I'm kind of with Mandy on this. I originally voted it down. I think it's very important that we have it, but it's just too much money. I'd be willing to make a motion to go to $500,000.
I second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve $500,000 for the Workforce Academy. Is there any discussion?
How much do we actually need? I mean, what does the academy need? I'm just curious where we're at.
In the funding model, and I have it here to share it with you if you want it. In the funding model, private investments thus far, commitments that they have for the Workforce Academy is, and this is from the private sector, $11,470,000. On July 6th, Cass County committed to $5 million. Fueling the Future committed to $1 million on last week, Wednesday. The City of Fargo is committed to $1.5 million. There is a grant application that's being submitted this week to the United States Department of Commerce for $5 million. That will take this to the total of $25 million. The original plan for building the Workforce Academy was for $30 million. So this plan at the $25 million, and of course they have us plugged in at $1.25 million in the financing plan. The idea is that what they would do is they'd build the academy at the original size, the shell of the building. They would finish a percentage of it, and I don't know if I have that right here in front of me, of about 75%, 80%, so they'd build the shell, but they'd finish it at about 75%. That would eat up the budget of $25 million. So they've downgraded the size of what they were going to do, the original investment, because of the capital considerations that they're dealing with. Any more discussion on the motion? I would ask the commission to reconsider the possibility. My suggestion would be $600,000, down from the $800,000 that Commissioner Gjerdevig initiated last week or 2 weeks ago in our commission meeting, and a little more money than what Commissioner Simmons has in the motion, and Commissioner George has seconded.
This is spread out over how many year period?
It's
5 years.
5 years.
5 years.
And it's contingent on getting the federal money? Is that?
That's right.
And we could certainly
Got that.
we
yeah.
could certainly put that in.
Thank you, Mayor, yes.
That we'd revisit this again.
Yep.
So with that being said, I would respectfully request that West Fargo consider the $600,000 with the contingent that if the federal grant is not approved at the $5 million, that we have the right to have this discussion again.
I guess I'd be okay with that.
Thank you, Commissioner George. We still have a motion on the table for $500,000. Is there any more discussion? Being none, we're going to proceed to vote. Commissioner, you want a roll call vote? You asked for one last week.
Please.
All right, we're going to, Commissioner George,
Yes.
yes to the $500,000.
Yes.
Commissioner Olson,
No.
Commissioner Dardis, no. Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
Commissioner Gjerdevig.
No.
Is there any further discussion?
Where does that leave us?
That leaves us, it's null and void. I'm sorry.
Null and void. We have no motion on the table. We have no dollar amount commitment.
Okay, then do you want to make the motion, or can we make a motion then with your suggestion?
The commission president can make a motion. I would make a motion of $600,000 contingent that the $5 million U.S. Department of Commerce grant be approved.
Second that
And thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Are we ready to vote?
We've come
Commissioner
this-
Simmons, you're
We-
you're leaning towards your microphone.
We've come this far, might as well do a roll call again.
All right. Commissioner George.
Yes.
Commissioner Olson.
Yes.
Commissioner Dardis, yes. Commissioner Simmons.
No.
Commissioner Gjerdevig.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next order of business is item number 2, the recommendation for the appointment of the West Fargo Chief of Police, Mrs. Fisk.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. I can honestly say that this has been a long process, a very good process. We were fortunate enough to have 2 excellent final candidates. Either one would serve the City of West Fargo very, very proud and do a very good job. At the end of the day, through all the meetings and so on and so forth, my recommendation to you at this time is to appoint Dennis Ordinance as the West Fargo Chief of Police.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Are there any questions of Mrs. Fisk?
Can we ask why,
Please, Commissioner.
how you came to that determination?
Yes, we had an interview committee. We had open sessions with different staff, from whether it was PD around the city, commissioners, whoever, visited with the 2 candidates. And at the end of the day, they both were very strong, but the Dennis himself had a lot more historic background in a lot of different areas, more in leadership. Though the other candidate, who is in-house, is a very, very strong candidate, Dennis Ordinance at this time has a much more extensive background in leadership of agencies, and I felt it was the best at this time for the police department to have Dennis come in, and he can learn from the amazing staff that we have.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Any other questions of Mrs. Fisk? This is an actionable item, so we'll have to make a... Commissioners, what's your pleasure?
I would make a motion to accept the recommendation of the City Administrator.
Thank you, Commissioner Gjerdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Olson. It's been moved and seconded to accept the recommendation for the appointment of the West Fargo Chief of Police, Dennis Ordinance. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 3.
One moment. Oh, sorry. Since you've confirmed the appointment, he will actually be coming at a later meeting to be officially appointed by you as Chief of Police for the City of West Fargo, pending his background investigations, drug screens, and so forth. So I'll keep you posted.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Item number 3 is the first reading of changes to Ordinance 1160. Public Works Director, Mr. Matt Anvik.
Good evening, Commissioner President and Commissioners. This is the first reading for Ordinance 1160 for our sump pump program. Just to kind of give you some background, our current program, if one of the homeowners would like to discharge their sump pump into the sanitary sewer between November and April, or November 1st and April 1st, they can currently get a variance, which is just a $50 fee once they pay that. Currently, we have right around 600 people that are utilizing that program, but through some of the building permits and stuff, we know that people between 1,200 and 1,500 people have bypasses, so they have the capability of dumping into our sanitary sewer. The reason why we're kind of changing this now is because of the connection to Fargo. We're trying to limit our
Excuse me, Matt, would you explain a little bit for the public watching our connection to Fargo?
Our connection to the wastewater for Fargo. Currently, we are sending about 1.2 million gallons per day of wastewater to be treated in Fargo. The rest is going to our lagoons. In the future, with decommissioning the lagoons, all of that will be going to Fargo. And every gallon that we do pump to Fargo will be will be charged for. So this way, we're trying to limit the I&I or the inflow that we have into our system. What we would change is just kind of do a fee based on what the commission would set for every household in West Fargo. That would be paid an annual fee, so that we do away with the variance part of it, and then everybody would be charged. But if you didn't have sump pump in your house, or you could prove that you had no connection to the sump or to dump into the sanitary sewer, you could sign a waiver and get that fee eliminated from your bill. Just kind of why we do that too is, I was just assuming maybe 10% of our service connections, which is about 1,100 services in the city, and on just a normal heavy rain event like we've had a few this year, it would roughly be about 1.3 million gallons a day that would go into our sanitary sewer. Had we be paying for that, that would be about $4,000 a day that we'd do. So that's kind of the background on what we'd like to change. The ordinance, I guess, was in your packet, so if there's any questions.
Commissioner Simmons?
There's lots of questions. Matt, first of all, as I read this, I understand what you're trying to do. I just don't know, number one, is this is the time with all the raises we're doing anyway, and now perhaps a mill increase. But my biggest concern here is, we're always known to be innocent until proven guilty. With your system, we're guilty and we have to prove we're innocent. That doesn't really, to me, that doesn't sit very well. It's like, if I own a home, you're automatically going to say I'm guilty, and I have to come to you and prove I'm innocent. I don't think it should be like that, regardless of how we do things. I don't think that's right.
Right, and that's what, when we were looking at doing this, we were wondering how to do that, and really we can't. The problem is we don't have the people or the ability to check houses to see if they're complying with it, because currently, there is a penalty for non-compliance, but, or illegally dumping, I guess, if you would, but there's really no way for us to check that.
That's not the homeowner's fault. I mean, that's not the taxpayer's fault, because we can't figure out a way. We're just going to charge them all.
Correct, yes. I mean, we can do nothing. I mean, we can keep it the way it is, but if people keep dumping in there, it's just going to end up being a rate increase down the road. And that everybody will have to pay for, then not just the people. We're trying to get to the point where it's just the people that are actually using it, but that was the question we had, was how do we get to that point? Right,
because right now everybody will be paying for it the way you're going to go. Yes, they can opt out, but at first they're going to be paying for it.
And that's the big thing would be, if this does pass and go forward, it's going to be just the communication getting out to the residents that don't have this, and probably have a bill, mailing in the bill that they can fill out and send back in if they don't have one.
What I tried to find out, what is the form in the actual, is it simple, or is it, do they got to just sign their name and say I don't have it, or do they have to come and prove to the city?
It would just be a simple form saying that they...
So you don't have it ready yet, that form?
We don't know, but it's just going to be a simple form to fill it out, so.
Commissioner Gjerdevig.
Kind of extending upon what Commissioner Simmons said, the part of this that I actually dislike is the line where it says we're going to audit 3% of customers per year to verify compliance. That seems very intrusive to say that we're going to knock on somebody's door, and I suspect a large number of people are going to not want to let the person in.
Right.
What's going to be our process for that? I have one more question, but I'll let you answer that one first.
The similar process, what we thought to do with that is similar to how we go into and check meters, water meters that do it. I mean, that's basically a call and see if we can set up a time. With the water meter, it's a little different. We can, there's ways we can get in there to check on that, but with this, it would basically still be on the honor system if they want to let us in or not.
Okay, so I have a valve in my house. I can switch it one way to pump it outside. I can switch it one way to pump it into the city.
Correct.
I'm a very honest person, so I wouldn't do this. But if the city is setting an appointment to come and inspect, I'm probably going to go switch the valve to pump outside, even if I was pumping inside.
Right.
So I'm not sure auditing it, if we're setting up appointments, is really going to address the issue. I will also say, as somebody who's line outside froze up in October of last year that I think we should be extending this 15 days on each end, because April 1st, sometimes those pumping outside is not technically feasible, and I had to redo my line outside this spring because it froze up last October. So,
Right.
Commissioner Olson?
Most people, I would think, in this city have a sump pump. If they don't, they probably have a slab home. Maybe you don't have it plumbed today, and you could certify it today that it's not plumbed there. But you could have a plumber come in tomorrow and have it plumbed. So would this certification be a one-time, or is it gonna be an annual certification?
I think this would just be a one-time certification is what we were planning for right now. But you are correct. Anybody with a sump pump would be probably, if they knew a little bit about plumbing, could be about 10 minutes and put it into a drain.
So, to me, if you have a sump pump, you have the capability, and if you don't have it, then you won't be, to me, that's how I would do it if I was thinking, because we're gonna be charged for it, because Fargo charges us to take that water. We're gonna have to recoup the cost somehow. But to me, if everybody who has a sump pump gets assessed the same thing, then we're paying for the water that goes to, Fargo.
Yeah, but what if they aren't putting it in the...
They could tomorrow.
Well, again, we're all...
The next homeowner could do it.
We're all assuming. My point of this is not only we're assuming, but, I think we get a lot more I&I out of our rickety, rusty old sewer system than we do from a house. I think we should be focusing our attention on reconstructing the downtown, what we're talking about. That's where our effort should be. I just think we get more water from pipes we don't know if they're broken.
That would be part of it. I mean, just look back at the spring melt this year. We did 3 days in a row. We were about 10.2 million that we brought in, and then there was 2 other days that were over 9. Had we been sending all that to Fargo, that's $40,000 a day. That's going in there. And this is just roughly part of it. I mean, if we had 1,500 houses that were doing that pumping in, that's over 2 million gallons per event per day that's going out the door, and, if we're normally doing 3.5, I mean, that's 5 million coming in somewhere else. So you are correct. We do have other issues that we need to do, but this is just one step that we can handle right now. It's just the smaller dollar figure to do this right now than large-scale replacement.
Commissioner George?
So I'm with Mark, as far as, I don't think we should be charging everybody and making them do the paperwork afterwards. My sump pump goes to my lawn. I don't even have an option. And as well as most of my neighbors are either they go on their lawn or their slab. So it's for us to have to do the paperwork, and I'm sure a lot of neighborhoods are in the same boat. What maybe would work is if people aren't self-reporting, maybe we need to get the word out better, because maybe a lot of people I don't know if people know that they need to do that to pay the fee. Maybe put it out there on social media, or maybe make it more public that people need to pay the fee if they're going to dump it into the sewer, and maybe make a bigger fine for it if they don't, to help cover those charges instead.
Yeah, the issue is that it's hard for us to find anybody, find that they are dumping in there, to find them, if they were. I was told that in the past, every year, usually around November, they do send mailers out or reminders saying that you can switch it over, or now make sure it goes back outside, or, if you're going to have a variance.
Well, and like I said, maybe instead of a mailer, it needs to be out there on social media. That's how most people get their news nowadays, and we have a big social media department now. Maybe that's where they need to be throwing it out there.
Yeah, we
I think
definitely
it's
can
been
do
on
that.
social media.
Okay.
Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you. I would say the best way to do it is just send that vacuum truck around a few times more out there. People catch on when that's out in front of their house, and you're checking because I know that's a way that we could check it, right?
Well, we'd have to actually send a camera down in the sewer, and then we'd really have to just wait and...
Well, we used to do that every now and then. I remember years ago, we put the old truck out there, and I mean, I'm just saying right now, the only thing it bothers me, because I think that with this system, everybody's guilty, and they got to prove their innocence. And I don't think that's the way we should be.
Mm-hmm. Right, and to get charged a fee, even though it'll be only like $5 a month, we're already charging additional on sewer rates. People are already mad about that. We're going to make them even more mad. I just think the timing's bad too.
In the end, it probably will cost more if we don't, and if more people are dumping it in there, once we fully go over to Fargo. And we'll end up, then everybody in the city will end up paying for the ones that are using it. But yeah, that is the question, how do we regulate that people that are using it without getting the variance?
I would remind the commission that this is the first reading, so it's going to come back. So It's out there for the public now. Matt's made his, has a presentation and it's in the packet, so the public can discern, evaluate as to how they feel about that. Commissioner Olson?
Just one comment, since it's on the first reading, you know, on the certification, form, would it be, you know, we had a concern about entering the home and all that, if it'd be possible that if they certify that they do not have the you know, that it plumbed to the sanitary sewer, that authorizes West Fargo employees to enter the house to inspect. And that just for consideration, if that would be something too.
Yeah, I'd ask Mr. Andvik, by the second reading, try and have some of the paperwork, if you will, so for us to review too, that maybe it's not as burdensome as, you know, some of us are perceiving it to be right now.
Okay.
If you could maybe have some ideas of what other communities do or whatever.
Is that something also for the second reading? Would you want us to extend that time to, let's say, mid-October to?
Commissioner Gjerdevig, that was your point?
Personally, yes, that would be what I would like to see, but I mean, I can't speak for others. I just know that if you are discharging into the sanitary sewer because of a need, you know, in your house, switching outside on April 1st isn't always an option. And so we're forcing people into a situation where we know they're not going to be in compliance because they can't switch outside at that time because there's 2 feet of snow and everything is frozen.
Yeah.
So I would rather create an ordinance that people, you know, that we're comfortable that people legally can follow and not put them in a position where they have to feel like they're breaking a rule for a few weeks.
Right. I mean, that would be understandable. I know you never know when we have snow in part of April as well, but yeah, we can also put that in there as well.
You know, the purpose and the intent of Public Works bringing this forward is certainly worthy of this discussion. The fact that if there's water going into our system and we're paying for it, you know, again, we're paying X number of dollars for water that comes in. It's metered. We know how much water that is. But when we've got more water going out than we're buying, we're able, obviously it's pretty simple math to determine what we're dealing with. So that being said, again, thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you for the discussion. And I'm sure that public will reach out to many of us and engage in that conversation, and we'll have some more questions for you next time around. Thank you, Mr. Andvik. Commissioners,
do we need to do anything at being first reading?
You'd need a motion to approve the first reading.
I'll make the motion
With the
for
commission
first reading.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Gjerdevig. Have been moved and seconded to approve the first reading of changes to the Ordinance 1160. Any discussion? Commissioner George.
Since I'm new, what are we exactly approving on this reading? What is we approving?
Just the first reading, Commissioner George.
We're not approving the ordinance to move
just
forward.
the idea. We're
The
approving
idea.
the idea,
Thank
and they're
you.
going to bring it back for a second reading because now that it's out to the public, it'll have more opportunity for people to reach out to you and give their thoughts, or you to do your research. Commissioner Simmons, you
Just to clarify that, it puts it on the train.
Okay.
It goes down.
on the track. Is
Okay.
It's on the track.
All
So,
right.
in layman's terms, it's on the track.
Thank you.
that all right? Okay. Did we vote? Andy, you interrupted me. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business, 1332, create a district and approve ER. Mr. Scott.
Thank you and good evening.
What is the abbreviation ER?
Engineers report.
Engineering report. Thank you. Please, continue.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and members of the Commission. Before you tonight is the engineers report. Two items actually. One is to review the proposed improvement district, and the other one is the review of the engineers report, both for the improvement district number 1332 for Westview 4th edition, the proposed plat here. I'm going to get to And if you recall, at the last meeting, we reviewed the petition submitted by the developer requesting that the city create an improvement district and move forward with extending sewer water into this development. And so tonight, what you have in your packet are a handful of items. The first one being just a project summary. We're calling this a project cut sheet that is going to be put into our capital improvement plan. This just summarizes the nature of the improvements. Zoom in here. As you can see, the scope is going to consist of sanitary sewer, water mains, storm sewer, and then private concrete streets, along with other associated infrastructure necessary to service the Westview 4th Edition property. Also in your packet is this map here where we are defining the boundary of the proposed assessment district. As you can see, that boundary is basically the perimeter of the proposed plat of Westview 4th Edition. So if we were to create the improvement district and move forward with the improvements, all properties within this plat are going to be assessed. No outside properties at this time are being or planned to be assessed for these improvements. In other words, they're 100% local. I'm not going to go through the engineer's report in depth. I'm going to cut down to the engineering estimate. And as you can see here, they've estimated construction costs just over $1 million. That, along with the other, call it soft costs, the study report, engineering fees, legal administration, and bond discount, the total project at this point is estimated to be $1,300,000. And again, being assessed specifically to the properties in the Westview 4th Edition. One area within this report, the preliminary assessment analysis that was done, they are estimating an average of about $75,000 per property that's within this plat. Again, there's 22 lots. So again, with tonight's action, I'm asking to not only create sewer, water, storm, and street improvement district number 1332, but also to direct the engineer to prepare engineer's report, which you've just reviewed, and then also approve the engineer's report. And finally, to direct the engineer to prepare detailed plans and specifications for the construction of District 1332. With that, I'll pause and open up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Questions for Mr. Scott?
Yeah, just...
Commissioner Olson.
Is this going to be a new residential area?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Olson. At this point, to my knowledge, there's a plan for commercial office park, similar to what was done along 32nd Avenue in the Oak Ridge development, just west of Cashwise. Also similar to what was done in Eagle Run Plaza 9th Edition on the corner of 32nd and 9th Street West. And another location is at the Cheyenne Street 994 interchange, just kind of southeast of that interchange. So pretty common office park development by this developer. But, you know, I'm not sure if anything's changed. What I will pull up here on my screen is the proposed rendering that was submitted with the plat. Any other questions?
I just have a quick comment.
Commissioner George.
Just so the public's aware, I'm opposed to green space specials. I think the developer should take care of it. So that's where I'm at with it.
Thank you. What's immediately to the right of there on your 40th Avenue?
I'm sorry.
Whether you're looking at to the right what's immediately to the right of this?
Right now there's undeveloped land. I believe it's owned by the Faith Lutheran Church. So to the right
so
there's...
This is immediately to the west of the church on 40th.
Correct.
In perspective for the public.
Yes.
Okay. At this point in time, the developer is asking for special assessments to be applied to all of his property. There's 21 condos, if you will, in his plans. Given the amount of acreage and things like that, are we going to deal with the parking issues that we've had in numerous discussions on the other one? If you recall, the one that's over on the south side of 40th.
Or 32nd.
32nd, excuse me.
Parking issues, Mayor, for who? For the church?
Well, no, for these are not,
Okay,
this is not a housing place.
right,
This is gonna be condos for, shops.
Right, okay, like he has out on...
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm with you.
South of 32nd.
Right, yep.
I guess that's not part of the discussion this evening. We're just looking for whether or not we're going to approve a special assessment district for, this green space. So,
I'm gonna assume, which isn't good, that Tim is on top of that.
you could assume, right, I would assume.
So that's, that's very different.
So all we're doing is, allowing, engineering to create the, district and approve the engineer's report for 1332.
And to make, Mayor, all the, just so it's clear, I guess, for me as well, but all the assessments go to his property.
100%.
100%, okay.
Yes, sir.
If you like, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve, to create a special assessment district for 1332 at the request of the developer and approve the engineering report. Now, again, as Mr. Scott pointed out to us, there are, actually 3 items that are actionable on this. Is to approve the creation of the Sewer, Water, Storm, and Street Improvement District 1332, direct the engineer to prepare the engineer's report for sewer, water, storm, and street improvements for District 1332, and approve the engineer's report and direct the engineer to prepare detailed plans and specifications for the construction of said. So, that's the motion, if you will. It has to include those 3 items for Mr. Scott. Is there any further discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Item number 5 is, 1331, is to approve the plans and bid advertisement as presented in pages 62 to 64. Mr. Scott, Head of Engineering.
Thank you again, Commissioner President Dartis and members of the Commission. Tonight, we are bringing back the Wilds 20th edition. In previous meetings, we have created an improvement district. We had reviewed the engineer's report. Tonight, before you is to approve the plans and specifications and then authorize the advertisement of the bids. Again, for improvement district number 1331. In your packet, you have what's referred to as the general layout. Again, you can see here the improvements that are planned within this development. We are still planning to extend 9th Street just past Deb Drive. There is platted right-of-way here on 61st Avenue West. We figured that would be a logical terminus for the concrete road. And as you can see here, this road will continue the traditional divided median approach, but at Deb Drive start to transition and narrow down into more of just a simple 2-lane roadway that will provide access to 61st Avenue. And then we will construct an asphalt turnaround. And as we discussed at the last meeting and in previous subdivisions, at some point in the future there's an intent to put in an improved roadway or gravel or improved surface to connect down to 64th Avenue. But as you can see here, that at the end of this turnaround is where the city of Horace limits begins. So again, the nature of our project is intended to stop at our city limits. So again, tonight asking for approval of the plans and specifications, and then authorize advertisement of the bid documents. One item I want to note, the full construction set of plans will be available at the engineering office. They aren't quite complete yet, but we will not proceed to a bid opening, obviously, until we have completed plans. And so in the nature that something pops up where we have to delay progress on those plans, we would effectively change the bid date and issue an addendum to do so.
And your developer's aware of that?
Yes, sir. We had a coordination meeting last week with the developer.
Any questions of Mr. Scott?
I'll make the motion to approve the plan and authorize the advertisement of the bids.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Gjerdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the plan and specifications for construction of sewer, water, storm, and street improvements for the District 1331, and to authorize for the advertisement of bid documents for construction of said. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 6, 6055, review and update. Could you give a little narrative, Dustin, as to 6065, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner President Dartis, members of the Commission. In your packet, there is some information. I'm going to start with just a general, as Commissioner President Dartis asked for, just a brief description, and then I'm also going to open up a PowerPoint presentation to give some background on this project. I should say projects. As you can see in the agenda packet, we were recently awarded another grant for a second phase here. So let me back up and give a little background here. What you're seeing on the map, and I apologize, it's maybe a little challenging to gauge the location here. Where the blue and red meet is at 7th Avenue East on Drain 45, and this is located right around the Eastwood Elementary area. And I'll zoom out a little bit. On the west side of the map, you can see South Elementary. Here's the Veterans Memorial Pool. Again, Eastwood Elementary. 13th Avenue is towards the bottom of the map. And on the north side, we have Main Avenue. So what we have here is a pedestrian multi-use path extending with the intent to connect basically Main Avenue to 13th Avenue. And that would be constructed over the green space that is Drain 45. Back in 2010 or 11, we started an improvement, 2 projects really, where we enclosed the drain. The drain was an open channel with a concrete lined bottom. We basically affixed a metal arch pipe to that concrete liner and enclosed the drain, mostly relating to just some safety concerns through town having an open channel. After we did that, we completed that enclosure, both phase 1 and 2, I believe in 2013, and shortly after we started pursuing a grant from the North Dakota Department of Transportation. The grant is part of their Transportation Alternatives program. So the Transportation Alternatives program is generally non-roadway projects, more akin to what we have before us today, bike paths, pedestrian type improvements. I do want to say that we do have representatives here from MetroCog, and we also have, I believe I saw the West Fargo Park District Superintendent, Ms. Barb Erbstasser. So I may call upon them, depending on where the discussion goes. They might feel the need to come up and speak. Just letting you know up front here that they are in the background. So, I'm going to jump over to our PowerPoint here. And just to, again, provide some background, I don't mean to get too long-winded here with this, but again, want to provide at least a summary here before we get into the discussion at hand. So, like I just mentioned, we applied for the Transportation Alternatives Grant in 2014, and we didn't just submit an application for the Drain 45 multi-use path. There were other various projects that we've submitted for grant money, and when we've submitted these applications, the city itself did not place necessarily a priority to these. There are other committees that prioritize, review the project statewide, and select projects based on that committee. And again, the actual grant process itself, I would, if we need to get into that a little further, I would certainly call on Mr. Dan Farnsworth, who's here from MetroCog. We continued to apply for grants in 2015, 16, 17, and 18, along with those other projects. As you can see here, MetroCog placed the project high in an award recommendation for the Metro in the 2018 application. And in 2019, we were awarded funding for phase one of this bike path system, and phase one ended up being from 7th Avenue to 13th Avenue. And now, most recently here in 2020, we received a letter from the DOT awarding a grant for phase two, which is now from 7th Avenue up to Main Avenue. Phase one, the amount of the grant that was awarded was $232,000 at the time. That was the maximum amount that the DOT could award. And for phase two, the award amount is $290,000, and it's currently the maximum eligibility. I believe that's just a result of additional monies being available within their program. Again, the grant is issued by the North Dakota Department of Transportation. It covers construction costs at a cap maximum, and again, both of these grants are at their maximum allowed. The funding amount does not account for the budget increases, so things like when we submit these applications, we know that the construction is going to continue to increase, materials increase. So those grants, they generally don't account for that. They don't account for things like engineering services or legal administrative fees and or contingencies. The North Dakota Department of Transportation, the TA Project Committee is who ultimately reviews statewide all of the grant submittals. And if the funding is not accepted by the community, the funding is moved to lower prioritized projects. Last week, MetroCog, we've been in conversations with them. Actually, our transportation engineer, Andrew Rookie, has been communicating a lot with MetroCog here in the last couple of weeks. And they prepared a memo. It's attached into your packet. I have a clip from that memo. And again, the portion that you see here on this slide is just a quick summary of each phase, the amount of the construction that was identified in the application when we sent in the application, and then again the federal award amount, finally the local match. Just want to point out, as I mentioned in the agenda packet itself, that is based on the grant application dollars. And again, the grant application dollars did not include things like contingencies or consulting fees, legal administrative fees, and so on and so forth. It was purely just a construction estimate. So, MetroCog also sent over some other documents, one of them being a map. And as you can see here in this little clip from their overall, again, they've got a map of the entire region, but this proposed path will provide connectivity again from Main Avenue to 13th Avenue and fills a gap within not only our city, but again within the entire region. connects to other major multi-use paths. Certainly enhance pedestrian network for local neighborhoods as well as region-wide users. And as you can see here, Phase 1 and 2 were the third highest in the metro from the 2018 application, and Phase 2 was the highest in the metro area for that 2019 application submittal. So just a brief summary on the recent commission actions. Back in February, I did bring forward an engineer's report for Phase 1, again from 13th Avenue to 7th Avenue. And the commission did approve the engineer's report. That report itself now was a more detailed analysis of the project, had an updated engineering cost estimate, and if you recall, that engineering cost estimate included 40% contingencies, 20% for unrelated or unknown design type concerns, and 20% for unknown construction concerns. Then in April, I brought forward an engineering task order at April 6th and April 20th commission meetings. And as you may recall, I'm sorry, Commissioner George, you may certainly don't recall that, but
I watched it.
okay, great. The commission took no action with the task order itself. And so one of the discussions that we had was, could we ask the DOT to delay the bid? Originally, we were slated to open bids in June, and we had communicated with the DOT. They said that they could push the bid date back to October, and we would still be eligible for the funding. So, you put your eye on these numbers here within this green circle. I just took a brief shot at a possible revision to this engineering estimate, largely removing the contingencies. Instead of having 40% worth in contingencies, using more of a traditional project contingency of 10%, which inherently will reduce the other numbers, which are for the most part based on percentages. Ultimately, and again, you could continue to revise this, but just with this stroke of the paintbrush, I have a total project cost of $575,000, less that $232,000 grant. That gives us a share of approximately $350,000. Again, that is subject to competitive bidding. It's subject to construction conditions that we face, and so it is meant to just purely be a number to help gauge the discussion. Now for Phase 2, again, the DOT sent a letter congratulating us on receiving a grant. However, they've asked that we respond by July 31st with our intent on whether to use that money. As I mentioned in a previous slide, if we elect not to take this 2020 grant, they would then be able to reappropriate that to other lower priority projects. I am not 100% sure what the DOT would do if we decide not to pursue the Phase 1 as well, as that particular bucket of money is from a previous biennium. So I would have to look into what would they do with that $232,000 grant for Phase 1. So jumping back over to the information that is in your packet, again, there's a nice memo here just summarizing this process and the Phase 1 and 2 projects, as well as here is again, that estimate that was included in the engineer's report for Phase 1, and finally, the letters or correspondence that we received from the DOT regarding Phase 2. So with that, I'm gonna pause and open up for discussion. I can certainly try to answer questions, and like I mentioned, there are guests in the background that could possibly help with some of these questions.
Commissioner George has the first question.
Okay, yeah, a couple questions, couple things. First of all, like I said, I watched this meeting on it the first time, and I appreciate Commissioner Gjerdevig's comments. I actually brought up some questions I had questions on as well with the contingencies, and I appreciate you asking about that. I use bike trails, multi-use paths myself quite a bit, so I have a couple questions specifically on this. One, is there an ordinance why it has to be so nice, like this expensive? Because I know through the parks, I mean, they seem much cheaper. So what's the reason it has to be this fancy? And two, where is the money coming from?
Okay, thank you, Commissioner George. As far as fancy, what we're proposing right now is just a standard 10-foot wide multi-use path that is going to be made of concrete. We don't have any aesthetic features planned in with this right now. Years ago, there was more of an internal policy that the city would not install asphalt bike paths, for example. They turned into, we did one before my time, and it was relatively a maintenance headache concern. Right. So in the last 10 years, we've only installed concrete paths. As far as the width, we could certainly look at something, a narrow section. Generally 10 feet is what we consider a multi-use path or capable of multi-use. But that, again, we could certainly consider, 8 feet, 6 feet.
Well, that was my biggest question. I think asphalt versus the concrete.
Asphalt versus concrete, sure. As far as where the money's coming from, what was in our CIP is the use of capital improvement sales tax. Again, there's no intent to create an assessment district and special assess these costs. It would come out of our capital improvement sales tax. I would probably defer to Jim or Tina on the actual financing of it, but for our capital improvement plan, it's being funded through our capital improvement sales tax.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. So Dustin, just to make sure I got these numbers straight, the total bill is $829,500, and with the grants, the total that we would have to come up with $307,500, correct? Is that accurate?
For phase one.
After the grant money. I think I'm looking right at
Commissioner Simmons, here I'm gonna go to this slide. And so for what you see here, these numbers are specifically for phase one.
Just phase one.
So phase one.
Okay, I'm sorry, Dustin. Just to just to speed things up, we got a long night. Go to the page I'm on, MetroCog, 2020. It says here it's our shares is 155 and 152.5, which equals 307, right?
Correct. So I just want to caveat this, Commissioner Simmons, that as you see, those numbers were the actual grant application dollar amounts. And so the construction cost, when we sent in the application in 2018 for phase one, the construction cost that we identified was $387,000. Now, this was before we had studied the project and put together a detailed engineering estimate. So these numbers here have changed, or at least for phase one, where we did progress into the design and put together a detailed cost estimate, which are the numbers here that you can see on this particular screen. The total project cost that we estimated in that engineer's report was $740,000. Again, 40% contingencies. If we were to reduce that down to 10%, and some of these other numbers reduce that down, we could ballpark an estimate at $575,000. So that would leave a city share of $350,000 for phase one alone. Now, we have not started any detailed work on phase two yet, and so I don't have a detailed estimate like this.
So what do you think a roundabout would be that it's going to cost the city for phase two?
Is it similar in the number of blocks?
I'd say yes. It's similar in number of blocks.
About the same amount.
Phase two is a little more complicated in that there's a little less room to construct, but...
So we're still looking 600,000, 650.
Sure.
Somewhere,
just
for the numbers
estimate, yes.
So, again, I go back as I did before, and I can't remember, Maddie wasn't here during any of this conversation, I'm sorry.
Mike was still here.
So I go back to the same thing. And I know MetroCog is here, but I have never been not once, to put in a bike path here. So that concerns me. The other thing is this is $600,000, $650,000 that we could put right into our streets, and Dustin, we all know, they need the work right downtown, right off of this bike path. That road needs to be, those sewer needs to be reconstructed. I just don't understand again, why we would move forward with this project at over $500,000. Just a comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson, you had a point?
There's I think there needs to be some more tweaking done to the application process, and it's hard for Dustin and others in other cities to come up with a detailed engineering report before it gets this far. And we're not the only city that wrestles with this. I sit on the MetroCog, and it's not just a West Fargo problem that when they get awarded, it's like, oh my God, now what are we going to do? We don't want to lose the money because we don't know if we'll ever get a chance to reapply. But, I mean, we can always reapply, but we don't know if we're going to have a mark against us that we turned it away or not. I'm not saying that that's the reason why we need to approve it, but there's got to be a better way of the application process to know where we're at. But at the same time, we maxed out on what our federal money we could get. But we won't get any more than that no matter how much it costs. That's the max we'll get. But I understand where you're coming from, where's the money going to come from?
I like to throw Commissioner Georges into this one because her favorite saying is wants and needs. And to me, this is a want. That road is a need. That's my point of the conversation.
Can that economic development money or whatever that we'd be putting towards this bike trail, are we allowed to put that on those roads that need to be done?
Well, we're proposing to use capital improvement sales tax for this, and I'll let Tina answer further.
The purpose of the capital improvement sales tax would be for anything city-related. So it could be roads, bridges, city buildings, it could be bike paths, it could be other amenities that are city-related. So, yes.
Commissioner Gjerdevig.
Couple comments. First off, when this was discussed previously, my biggest issue was the 40% contingencies. I did take the opportunity today to visit with one of our park board members about this path. For people that might not know, the Service Club Park behind Eastwood Elementary has been being redone. There's some beautiful new baseball diamonds that have been added into there. And with that, they removed the bike path or a portion of the path that was there, and with the assumption that this was going in because their path literally dead ends at where this path would start. So there have been some, this would be a good project to connect a number of city parks and schools between the Ladone Center, Eastwood Elementary, Service Club Park, Towers Field. I mean, I can certainly see where there's some big benefits to our community. And this park board member also, he was strongly supportive of the idea of this path. That said, the huge amount of contingencies that have been built into the estimate was like my initial issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Gjerdevig. I too, my biggest concern was the contingencies running at 40% that I thought were exorbitant and would never get me to vote for something like that if we can't narrow the cost estimates down more finite than that. The one thing that's in the back of my mind is that, this has been a plan as part of West Fargo 2.0 about the plans of previous commissioners, of which Mr. Simmons, you certainly would be a part of that, on making our community more livable, more accessible, more connected, if you will. And these applications for these dollars have been taking place over a number of years. 3-4 years is when those applications went in. And I am concerned also about the dollars, how we would spend general tax fund money. But I am also concerned that in the future, the North Dakota DOT or MetroCog, how they will view the city of West Fargo if we were to decline to take these the shared expense costs from them. That have as I think a check mark behind our name, that why would we approve one of their projects that comes to the top if they in fact are going to slow the process down or not participate. So there's a challenge in our votes here, and it's more complicated and strictly the dollars that are that we might invest at a time when, you know, the projections are for sales tax dollars or highway fund dollars and all those things come into the city. You know, our forecasts, we're pulling back 20%. Indications are sales tax are not lagging that far behind previous months or years. So I think we have to weigh all of this, and it's difficult. Commissioner Gjerdevig has an additional point.
One more comment I guess I'll make, having lived in this part of West Fargo pretty much my entire life. You know, if we go to the south side of town, we have a number of different nice investments that have been made in terms of paths. We have a pedestrian underpass. We have all kinds of investments that the city has made. This part of West Fargo, I'm not sure where the closest north-south, you know, pedestrian or bike path is within this part of West Fargo, and I think it would be a very nice project to add in into the north side of West Fargo.
Great point. Thank you. Additional comments, questions for Mr. Scott? Okay, this is a review update of Project 6055, obviously Phase 1 and Phase 2. Are you looking for an actionable to accept Phase 1 portion and then, of course, to move forward on Phase 2 in addition, Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis, members of the Commission. So tonight, looking for direction on each phase, and I think they kind of come hand in hand, but I'll let the Commission decide for that. Ultimately, for Phase 1, looking for a directive to, I guess, send the DOT our final documents so that they will move forward and open bids for this project, which is another point I failed to make during the presentation, that if we receive bids and they are you know, way high, we can certainly, again, we will be bringing that back before the Commission. Okay. So it's direction on whether to proceed with Phase 1, and then also with Phase 2, it's direction on how to respond to the DOT's letter asking for confirmation on our intent with this grant.
Commissioners, what's your pleasure? Item 1 first, item 2? Again, we'll come back before the City Commission to vote on the actual expenditure of the dollars on Phase 1. This is because the bids will come in, is that correct?
Correct. So
we still have an opportunity if the bids come in high or low, and it calms some of our concerns. So if
I would make a motion to push Phase 1 to a bid so that we can actually see what we're talking about in terms of dollars. Thank you, Commissioner Gjerdevig. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Olson. Has been moved and seconded to move forward with Phase 1 as detailed by Mr. Scott. Is there any further discussion?
Apologize,
please.
Commissioner President Dardis. One clarification. I probably should have put this in the packet, but if we are to move forward, I'd probably also ask for direction on bringing back that engineering task order, at least a part of it, so that we have the services of more engineering under contract.
Okay. First, motion and second, is that okay with you? All right. Been approved. That is added to the motion. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. Phase 2 of that now is part of the discussion of direction for Mr. Scott to respond to MetroCog and the North Dakota DOT as to how we feel about that. Commissioners?
Well, if we don't have Phase 2, Phase 1 doesn't, kind of leaves them hanging in the middle of nowhere to connect all the way to Main Avenue. So I don't know what kind of motion you need, but I move ahead is what.
Move ahead. Response to North Dakota DOT that
right. Yeah.
Our intent is that we will move ahead with Phase 2 of this project.
That'll be my motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Gjerdevig seconds. Discussion, please. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 7. I'm sorry, Commission. We're gonna this is gonna be a long meeting, so we're gonna take about a 5 or 10 minute break. This George is on our 3rd can of pop up here, so we're not gonna ask any questions. We're just gonna take a 5-minute break, please.
Thank you, it's probably time.
I am very grateful on your help on item number 1. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your help on item number 1 again.
It was difficult to be
I knew that he was good. I've been expecting a projectile just flying up here. Possibly, my friend Dwayne Hanson, matter of hell about something other than a firehouse. We haven't spent the time. You mean on my deal with the I've had dinner with him. That's pretty good. The city took out. Oh, I mean. Oh, you can't be as bad as Kevin. Hey, that's fighting words to say you talk as much as Kevin. Oh, you're making it work. Great to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Yes, sir. We'll reconvene the meeting, please. We are at item number 7. Mr. Scott again is back to talk to us about 1289.3 to award a contract.
Well, thank you, Commissioner President Gardis, members of the Commission. Hope everyone enjoyed the break. I am going to try to go quick with this one, understanding that there might be some questions. Basically, Improvement District number 1289 was started back in 2015. It is a project meant to serve industrial development up on the north side of town, along our diversion. There's the Butler industrial area, Caterpillar, some of the industrial type users out in this area, and on the north side of the railroad tracks here we have Coast Concrete and other development. So these improvements again started about 5 years ago with the first phase where we started bringing in sewer and water. 1289 also included a connection to be made from our stormwater pumping station, which I'm going to zoom in here on the map. You will see here on your screen there is a stormwater retention pond, and the little dot in here is our stormwater pumping station that takes all of the stormwater runoff, pumps it into the diversion, or at least it will, once 1289 is complete. One thing that we were unable to do is we weren't able to put in the force main connection through the diversion levee. When we started this project, we applied for a permit to do so from the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Unfortunately, in 2016 or 17, what used to take 6 months basically got put on hold. There were several permits that the city had that ended up taking a couple of years, even more in some cases. The entire area, nationwide even, suffered this delay on these types of permits. The unfortunate thing here, so we had to bid that work out. We had to remove it from that original contractor, again, as we were put on hold with the Corps of Engineers and that permit. Fast forward to this year, we have finally received that permit that we applied for, and so we are now moving forward with, we obtained quotes from what we felt were qualified bidders. And so we did not go through a full competitive bidding process. The state law allows that when improvements are going to be under $200,000, we can go out and get quotes. We don't have to go through the same bid advertisement process as we would if it were over $200,000. So, long story short, the low bidder, when we solicited quotes, was Key Contracting. And again, the nature of their work now is to come out here and basically make the connection to the underground force main that's in here by this pumping station, get that through the diversion levee so that we can pump the water into the diversion channel as intended. And the amount of their quote, I believe, was $155,000. I can confirm that before I misspeak. I'm gonna, and then again, we've got it's what's called a short form contract, contract for construction of a small project. It follows the same nature of our large scale projects, but a little more scaled down. And again, they're just going to get to their bid number here, which is ultimately tonight I'm asking to authorize this contract between the city and Key Contracting. I apologize, I passed right past it here.
When this work was originally pulled out of the original contract, and the Key Contracting bid now, is it a similar dollar amount that was anticipated?
Yes, I don't have that exact comparison for the commission tonight, but it is very similar. In fact, one thing I do know is this district has already been bonded, assessed. The finances are there, and we do have this $155,000 is still going to be paid out of this district. So,
yep.
I apologize, I'm not getting there quick enough.
Please, Commissioner Gjerdevig.
That is correct, Commissioner Gjerdevig. Thank you for that clarification. So, just to restate that, District 1289 was bonded, the assessments were levied, certified, I believe it was in 2018. And so for the past 2 years, we've actually had to control this stormwater. Public Works has deployed a handful of movable pumps to draw down the water. So going through another spring the way we've had to, certainly welcoming the ability to finally get this pipe connected. But yes, the financing is already taken care of. Again, I apologize, I failed to get to that spot in the contract.
This is 1289.3, so point 1 and point 2 must be phases 1 and 2, and they're done. We're just waiting to connect this pipe, basically.
That's correct, Commissioner Olson, yes. And overall, the project that was bonded and assessed, the overall project was $10,625,000. And actually, as the funding notes here, the project was funded by special assessments and bonded in 2017. So, and again, we are within that dollar amount. We do not have to cover this with any local city funds. After confirming that with Jim Larson, I'm confident in making that statement. What I'm struggling to find, though, is the exact quote. And I'm just going to go to a different file here and pull that up. Oh, that didn't help. don't know if either of the commissioners have read this closer than I have, but, if you...
I'm searching for it too in here, I can't find it.
apologize. I know it's in your, it's in your packet. That must be what happened. I must have accidentally excluded it. Here we go.
So you think it's in the, there it is.
There it is,
So their bid of $155,155, so, just to confirm their price.
Thank you, Commissioner Gjerdevig. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Olson. Been moved and seconded to approve the estimate at $155,122 as outlined by Mr. Scott. Further discussion? Please, Commissioner Sims. Yep.
Appreciate that.
He's got the next one too. You're ahead of us. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8 is a proposal from Applied Research Associates with regard to a street assessment. Mr. Scott.
Thank you again, Commissioner President Dartis and members of the Commission. So what we have before you is a proposal to do a citywide pavement analysis and basically to inventory the existing conditions of our streets. The last time we did this was back in 2016, and bringing this forward, this is not something that we must do, but generally I'd like to get us on a 2 or even a 3-year cycle so that we can better plan for improvements that are needed, where they're needed, and again, just have a good inventory and assessment of the pavement conditions of all of our streets in town. As you can see in the packet, the proposal that is submitted covers a variety of services, not just the inventorying of the streets, but is also going to come with the a package to put together GIS data, and again, give us a good basis for where our pavement sits. And what you see in their proposal are some examples of the product that they provide. I would certainly ask our transportation engineer, Andrew Rucky, to come up and help answer questions depending on where that goes. But for now, I'm gonna hit a pause and just ask if there are any questions specific to what their work is going to do, as well as then again the cost of their proposal.
So you said that this was done in 2000 what?
16, I believe.
Tell me what, once that data was provided to you, Public Works, your engineering team, what did you do with it? I mean, if we had 50 miles or 50 street miles of this, tell me what you did with it.
The most, I'd say the predominant use of it was giving it to our consultant that was working on the core area infrastructure master plan. That study utilized this data to put together their analysis and recommendations for improvements regarding the street system. The
surface streets.
Correct.
So, because our other consultant did underground, right?
Well, the same consultant evaluated the underground and the street system in that core area infrastructure study that was concluded recently. It included the underground analysis along with the street analysis. And so...
so this firm didn't do the street analysis?
This firm, we had a similar street analysis. We gave that information. So when they provided us the information, we provided that to our consultant working on the study so that they could conduct their, call it their project recommendations. When they analyzed, if you recall, the core area infrastructure study came up with a matrix of things to identify the conditions of not only the underground utilities, but our surface improvements. And so instead of our consultant that worked on the study to go out and collect the inventory on the streets themselves, we provided them with the inventory information so that they could put that together in their final documents of that core study, if that makes sense.
Yes, George.
So since we've already identified, like you said, in the core area infrastructure plan as well as the CIP, we've already identified multiple roads that need to be done. Couldn't we get some of those going before we did another one?
Good question, Commissioner George. Yes, we do have a handful of projects in our CIP. One of the things that is very rapidly changing are certainly street conditions. And from year to year, with our climate, our conditions, we see in the summertime, as soon as it gets hot, we see streets buckling. As soon as the spring comes, we see heaves, the swell of the soils. And so even though we had good data that produced a document that recommended projects, it would be good to have another base point for this data so that we can not only continue to plan new projects, but also go back to the drawing board that was already, the roadmap in the core area, for example. And before we move forward with bringing a project forward, we can reassess the condition here. And now maybe the core area recommended a project for 2024, but based on this data, we realized that the road significantly deteriorated in the 4 years that's gone by, and we might need to move that up. So again, great question. Do we do this now? Do we kind of sit on the information we have and keep making decisions based on it? And like I said at the beginning, I'd certainly prefer to get this started and have a good inventory again, or an update to our inventory. But if we were to delay this another year or even two, we can certainly do that. But we make better decisions with most recent and current information. So that's why I'm bringing it forward.
So I see what you're saying about core area, but I mean, I think we can be pretty confident everything south of 13th Avenue looks pretty good, and then it's the core that needs to be done. Could this be something where just north of 13th gets analyzed for a lesser cost, or is that not an option?
Absolutely, we could focus in on one small area. We could focus in. I'd say there are some economies to scale in terms of if we were to have them hire them to do a square mile versus all 13 square miles. There is an economy of scale where the more you add on, the price doesn't change much. The other reason why I would suggest having the city-wide approach is that you're not trying to piecemeal certain areas. So you might have north of town in 2020, and then the following year you have south of town, and you're starting to deal with an overlap of data. Whereas if you just get on a cycle and have the entire city done, you're consistently looking at that same information.
We often refer to parts of our city that are newer parts of the city. The reality is a lot of that's 20 years old too. South of the interstate, we crossed the interstate 20 years ago. Charles would have been, 25 years old, I would guess, something like that. So I certainly appreciate the thought. I'm wondering if, we shouldn't have more direction on what the sequence of years in between the data. And I realize fresh data is always, the logical thing to work from. But I struggle with doing consulting work and handing it to another consultant for them then to take that data and apply it and charge us for that. That's already been done. I mean,
just to clarify that, Commissioner President Darvis, what we were able to save is on that consultant doing the inventory themselves. They, similar to us having televised our own sewer, and then we gave those televising tapes to the consultant. They were able to just take the data, and instead of having to go collect that information and charging us for it, we were able to provide that information. So one thing I would, again, understanding that there's certainly budgetary concerns, I do want to mention that this $75,000 was not included in our capital improvement plan. So I would be asking basically to amend the capital improvement plan. It would be, my proposal would be to finance this out of, again, capital improvement sales tax, and I believe there's money there, but again, just wanted to make it known that this is not in the capital improvement plan. If there is, call it an option to, I would ask that the commission at least consider the work and add it to the capital improvement plan for either next year or even a future year.
Commissioner Gjerdevig, did you have a point?
Well, my question was pretty much answered with his comments. I was just wondering if it was in the budget for this year or not.
I have a question.
Question? Commissioner Olson?
So, let's say we went through with this, we got this information. Are we gonna utilize that data ourselves, or will we give this to another firm to massage and tell us what to do?
Good question. Thank you, Commissioner Olson. At this point, no, we would be using this data ourselves internally. The intent is to, and again, our transportation engineer, Mr. Rucky, is going to work with our GIS department to incorporate this data, and then we would work with Public Works on assessing the needs, and basically, again, it'll be our own tools. What we would do is, using some of the similar process that was done with the core area infrastructure study, we could use that same process, but do it ourselves internally.
All right. So with your analytics, as you talk about your traffic engineer, you talk about Public Works, you have your analytics, we approve this, and in 2 months you have the data. Is that going to drive pothole repairs, chipping of some streets that, you know, our staff does versus major street improvements? Or, you know, the CIP is long-range plans and normally capital improvement plans that are bigger of nature. Is this data also used for those chipping operations or pothole repairs and, you know, things of a smaller nature?
Absolutely. Great question.
Would that have a direct effect right away this year yet, that we'd be making improvements for our citizens?
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis. So yes, we do have in our capital improvement plan pavement management projects, and this information will certainly help narrow in and plan accordingly where specifically these projects are needed most.
Prioritize.
As well as there are some larger corridors, especially on the north side, that might help identify moving what might already be in our capital improvement plan up in years, or even pushing things back. We might get confirmation that, 7th Avenue Northeast, for example, we might get confirmation that that is in better condition than what we were thinking. Okay.
Commissioners, your thoughts? Any more questions for Mr. Scott?
This would be used in concert with our CIP.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's my understanding.
My personal opinion would be to just push it back. It's not currently budgeted for. I'd rather see us wait a year or two when it is in the budget. Dustin sounded like he'd be okay with that, so that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Commissioners, what's your pleasure? It is an actionable item. He has a proposal and he's asking us to act on it.
Got nothing for you this time, so.
I'll make the motion to approve the proposal from ARA for $74,500.
In 2020?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Gjerdevig seconds. Moved and approved the ARA proposal in the year 2020. Discussion. Commissioner Simmons. Federal tax.
The overall capital improvement sales tax.
Any further discussion? We'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you much.
Thank you. Regular agenda item number 9, the ordinance for 1153, fire ordinance amendment. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. This ordinance amendment an enactment carries forward the city's cleanup of transferring from a volunteer fire department that was conducted in connection with the rural fire department to a full-time fire department. So what the ordinance does is eliminates the references to the volunteer fire department. It does some cleanups in public conduct in case of fire. If you had a solely volunteer fire department, you have your chief assign different authorities. And then it goes ahead and formalizes the organizations and regulations of the fire department. It's largely a housekeeping ordinance, but we can answer any questions that you may have as a commission.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Commissioners, you have any questions of Mr. Shockley?
So is this different than what Mr. Gjerdevig just brought up? Is this a first reading, or this would be a resolution and it's done?
It's a first reading.
First reading, okay.
First reading for Ordinance 1153 with regard to the fire ordinance amendment. Cleaning it up. Commissioner Simmons.
Yeah, it's, and we can have the fire chief come up, is he here? And maybe talk about the use as a part-time. This is just cleaning up that it's no longer a voluntary fire department, that we have a full-time fire department. I don't know internally how we're going to treat volunteers, but.
Yeah. Good evening, Commissioner President Artis and members of the Commission. The language within the ordinance is we took everything that was volunteer out. We didn't put anything that was specifically full-time in there. So any class of employee is covered. So it would be our part-timers, it would be our full-timers. No. It's mainly, yeah, the main part here is just giving us the basis to exist. That's the biggest part of moving it over. But, it doesn't actually lay out, it allows for all classes of employment in there.
Thank you, Chief Fuller.
Yep.
Questions, additions? Okay, what's your pleasure on Ordinance 1153?
I'll make a motion to approve the first reading.
Mr. Gjerdevig moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds, moved and seconded to approve the Ordinance 1153 in the first reading. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Commissioners. Item number 10 is a resolution providing for the issuance of taxable gross revenue bonds. Parameters and the resolution. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, and I've Mike Manstrom from Collier's here. Tonight you have a parameters resolution before the Commission. A parameters resolution, in essence, gives a pricing committee that would be composed of the Finance Director, City Auditor, and the Commission President the authority to accept rates on the taxable bonds within a certain set of parameters. And Mike can go over what those parameters are for. These bonds relate to expenditures that are associated with the TIF district for the lights project. The expenditures have already been made, so these are just reimbursing the city for those expenditures. You'll note it is a taxable bond as opposed to a tax-exempt bond. Because of the way we set up the financing in that district, it is taxable, and maybe just a really fine point on why it's taxable. On the unique nature of this is that one of the goals of the city was to assure that any financing of that district, it stands or fails on its own. And so part of the district has what's referred to as a deficiency special assessment. So if there's ever any type of shortfall in the payment of these bonds, those properties would get a special assessment levied against just those properties within the Cheyenne Lights North and South. And so it's a really nice way to secure the bonds, and it also protects the city so that if there's insufficient revenue, you don't pull from other funds, you end up levying a deficiency special assessment. To start out the project, the city is putting some economic development sales tax in because there is a delay from the time the building is constructed to the time it starts collecting taxes. So it takes about a year to 18 months after you start construction, it gets valued, and then the city finally collects the tax dollars and can use to pay back the bonds.
With regard to the economic development funds, do you know the dollar amount?
I'd look to Jim for the precise amount. He's got it down to the dollars and cents.
Mr. Jim Larson, Director of Finance for the City of West Fargo.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, and Commissioners. The approximate amount that we will be fronting, it is a loan, so it does get paid back by the future TIF revenues. We estimated it that we would probably need to front about $1.8 to $2 million as we move through this, and then the TIF would then catch up and start returning it. This is primarily the first year's payment, which is about $1.2 million a year, and then some for the second year.
My follow-up question is when this initial TIF was set up, was from a finance standpoint or from an administrative standpoint, was that an understanding that that's just a normal process that sometimes we have to deal with?
Yep.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Thank you, Commissioners.
How long is this TIF?
This is a 25-year TIF that was approved back in 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, President Dardis and Commissioners. Mike Manstrom. Many years I've been Doherty in front of you guys. We were absorbed, purchased, and we are now an part of Colliers International. Very, very large securities firm. So there's 14,000 employees in 70 countries worldwide. My point in saying that is nothing changes in this room, nothing changes in North Dakota. The individuals that you've worked with over the past are still the same people that worked with John and Tina and myself. Nothing changed, our name changed, and just a little aside, the individual that stood in front of the city of West Fargo 25 years ago and hired me to stand in front of the city of West Fargo is now the president of the company, and still intimately involved in West Fargo's work, talks to John all the time when we do calls. So it's a very good thing for the city of West Fargo, and for the people working for Colliers. So I'm Colliers now rather than Doherty and Company. I'd be happy to answer questions regarding the parameters resolution. I could talk a little bit about timing. I would like to note and thank John and Tita and Jim, Craig Tice from Colliers and myself. We did about a 70-minute presentation with Moody's at 1 o'clock today. They're very impressed with the security of this issue. As we refer to it as a triple barrel bond, special assessment bonds are double barrel bonds because you have the geo deficiency pledge if the assessment district comes up short. This is a triple barrel bond because of the TIF revenue, which is adequate to support the bonds based on the projected TIF revenue incremental values. And then, of course, the pledge of some economic development funds through your sales tax, that's a half cent. That pledge, as well as going forward with the deficiency pledge that John talked about a little bit as far as assessing the property if there's ever a shortcome in any of those other revenue streams. And then there's a reserve fund and there's a supplemental fund. So it's a very, very strong security. I may not have told Tina and John, but after the call, after 20-some years of Moody's and S&P rating calls, I've never heard an analyst say, wow. And in that particular call, she said it twice. So it speaks highly, it's a little aside, but it speaks highly of rating analysts never want to let the horse out of the barn. They don't want you to know how they're thinking until they rate the issue. Moody's will be done with the rating. We should have a rating in next Thursday, I think the 30th, 31st. That will then really determine the interest rates you will receive. So we used a 4.15 as a taxable rate in the parameters resolution only because we don't really know for sure where Moody's is going to go. And then there's the macro environment issues with COVID. Nobody knows where anything's going. So rather than stop an issue, we have some issue. We believe the issue will come in at least a 3.85. We've been instructed by Jim to be under 4, so that's pretty important. But we're closer to 3.85 right now. Things could get better, depending on the rating from Moody's. If it's a very, very attractive rating, and we're counting on that, we will be a very low interest rate. I'm not concerned about the parameters we use for the interest rate, and we used a little higher 19 million, for the, 19.75 million is the not to exceed bond issue size, and comes into play because of premiums and discount bonds. Doesn't affect the city, but if we get a lot of premium bonds, you'll receive more proceeds. The premium comes back to the city, it all gets factored into your NIC. So we've got some leverage there, but 18.85 is what we're intending to finance the issue. That's where it's sized, that's where it will stay. That said, those are marketing decisions made by the traders that bid on the bonds. We get the rating on Thursday or Friday, the 30th and 31st. We'll be selling bonds the 1st of August. We'll have the bonds sold in about a 3-day period. And as long as we meet the parameters set out in this resolution, we don't have to wait for another meeting and another risk of a timing issue. We want to sign bid forms and lock it up as soon as we are committed to the bond issue as well. And that's what this parameters resolution will allow.
Questions? George.
So just to simplify this out, to make sure I've got this. So the 25-year TIF with, close to $19 million, that was already approved a long time ago. So all we're doing really is approving the bond for it, which then Epic will pay the city back for. And if they don't, which they will, but if they don't, then essentially the city owns the buildings. Is that basically?
That's exactly it. You're just allowing us to price bonds and come to.
Well, we wouldn't own the buildings. We would have the ability to especially assess the properties out there for deficiency.
To the developer, the owners.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think the city wants the buildings to be. We want.
So given all that, Mike, so these type of bonds don't normally have any detrimental effect to the overall mooting ratings and anything like that? This type of bonding?
This bonding will not impact your geo bonds or special assessment bonds, which is the vast majority of your portfolio.
Okay.
Revenue bonds, it's a separate security looked at separately.
Okay. And that being said, with the city, what you're seeing on cities, with COVID and sales tax, revenues are projected to be down and all of those types of things. Are you seeing movement by Moody when they're evaluating cities where the bond ratings might go from an A to an A minus or anything like that?
Tina briefly talked about the very low impact of COVID right now for the city of West Fargo, specifically in North Dakota in general.
I shared with the commissioners that information.
And actually right now, the market's hungry for your bonds because it is far more attractive to spend money in a market where there is a minimal impact at this time rather than running into New York or Miami and spending some money and not knowing really what's happening in the future. So right now, you're in the right spot, right time from that perspective.
And I can comment. I've been on several national ratings calls for different jurisdictions, and their rating agencies are asking a lot of questions about COVID and the impacts of COVID on sources of revenue. They want to know everything from, is there an impact to your tax revenue, because some cities, they're concerned that their sales, not just their sales tax, but their property tax is going down. Some states have imposed restrictions on their abilities through utility collections, and so they have a high default rate on their utilities. And so you're even seeing the questions about COVID going into what we refer to as utility bond deals. And so fortunately, we don't have those issues. And so it's kind of refreshing and I think the analyst was feeling that it was sort of refreshing not to have to deal with those issues here.
Well, I've been reading some articles and it had me a little bit concerned.
Absolutely.
Right. Mr. Simmons, Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mike. Rates gone up?
No, rates have been holding very, very. Remember, Mark, this is a taxable interest rate.
Yeah, a little.
And the tax exempt rates we've been. With your special assessment bonds, you'd be, in the 2.5. I know where you're looking.
You know what I'm thinking.
Exactly.
Commissioners, any other questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming over.
National item?
Yes, sir.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Approve the resolution.
Yes.
The issuance of the taxable gross revenue bonds. And Commissioner Olson's moved. Commissioner Simmons seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you again, Mike. Item number 11 is a resolution authorizing the sale of Lot 3, Block 1, Copang addition to the City of West Fargo. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President. You'll recall this came up at last meeting, and I prepared a resolution at the direction of the City Commission, and you'll see the real estate broker that's listed in the on the resolution. Commissioner Simmons has good contacts with the real estate community and had suggested that he would be willing to serve for the city in that role. So the resolution is drafted that way. Once the City Commission approves it, we would task him with going out to negotiate with the potential purchasers of the property and bring back the final, whatever the terms are, to the City Commission. Pretty straightforward.
Thank you, sir. Questions of Mr. Shockley? What's your pleasure, Commissioners?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Gjerdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the resolution authorizing the sale of Lot 3, Block 1, Copang addition to the City of West Fargo. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 12, COVID-19 discussion. Mrs. Fisk.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. It was with discussion with Commissioner Olson and Commissioner Gjerdevig. We were talking about the different processes of COVID. What do you follow? Where do you read? What do you believe? All those types of things. And we have these amazing spaces now in the City of West Fargo, and we want to make sure that we put in proper protocols to be able to keep our citizens safe, but at the same time allow them to enjoy the spaces that we've been able to work with others to create for them. And so in those discussions, I have created here a recommendation for events that would take place at the Lights Plaza, and I gave each of you a copy of that. The recommendations the current guidelines allow 75% capacity. The Lights Plaza can hold 4,000 people, and we're below 50% at our staff recommendation on this one. We're at 1,800 for a large event. Any changes to protocols would have to come through the city, come through me, and we would have to sign off on that so that we know what's going on. There's a clause in here that would allow us to, if they're not following the protocols listed, that we could pull them in as West Fargo Events is. We're their client. We could pull them in and have a discussion with them and decide how to proceed going forward. So I spoke with Pierre Freeman, our emergency manager, and he has has an extensive knowledge on different things, whether it's pandemic or other emergency issues. I worked with our communications director, and I also sent out information to our police and fire to get some feedback. This is the culmination of that, and I don't know if you want me to go through it or if you just want to ask me questions based on what you have in front of you.
Commissioners? What's your thoughts on that? Commissioner George?
So I have a few things on this. In the wording, under screening and entrance, okay, two issues I have, which I understand not everybody will agree with this. This is just me personally. It says masks required at entryway lines, and then we've got all attendees must use hand sanitizers. Me personally would prefer if it said encourage versus require. With both of those, same thing with the hand sanitizer. That's my personal point of view. We can simply look around this room. Some people choose to wear masks, some people don't. That's my personal preference.
Thank you, Commissioner George. The whole point of that one line is just that if you're in a line waiting to get in and get your temperature checked and whatever, if you can't socially distance because you're all waiting to get in that line, If it's a tight line like that, we want everyone to wear a mask just for the safety of those in front and behind. Once they're inside, it's encouraged, but not required. So if you walk up and there's nobody in line, you don't have to have a mask on. But it says right in here, if you're not able to maintain social distancing while waiting in line, we're asking that they wear a mask just for the safety of those around them, because they haven't been temperature checked or anything yet. So that's the purpose behind it. And I know what you're saying. It's up to all of you. I think it's important that we have protocols in place, and I worked with West Fargo Events and Epic Events, and they sent me their outline, and then we added to it to make sure it would comply with what the city felt was necessary.
Mr. Gjerdevig.
I actually really like the document. I think it's trying to find a balance between, not having the events and just letting them happen as they otherwise would. I guess the one suggestion I would have on here is to specifically call these rules out as being specific maybe to this year, or there's no timeline. This just looks like it's the new rules for the Lights Plaza, and obviously that we're all hopeful that these rules end certainly by next summer.
Yeah.
Cross our fingers. So I think just somehow calling that out, that maybe they're approved through the end of the year or something along those lines.
If there was a motion and you wanted to include that, I would make sure I made that notation.
There was some discussion earlier also about, being specific to the Lights District rather than city-owned spaces or whatever. And there's an issue a bit there too, because then all of a sudden, sometimes the public misunderstands that the Park District is separate, really from the city of West Fargo, and that could be misconstrued as to what the intentions of this document is, and the same could be said of the West Fargo Public Schools, city-owned property. It obviously it's so I think we need to be consistent and cautious as to how we do the title.
Yeah. And that was thank you, President Dardis. That was the reason that I specifically said for events at the Lights Plaza, because the Lights Plaza is one area. You have the POW MIA Plaza, which is a totally different type of area, that if they're having a large event, it's hard to, you'd have to find a way, we'd have to write a different protocol because it's a different size, it's a different type of venue, and how would you stop people from coming and going, where here you can stop people getting in and you can watch them getting out and make sure you're kind of guarding all that. So I felt that since this was the biggest issue right now, I felt that this was the most important to address with all of you so that we could have some kind of answers. So staff recommendation is to allow these events based on these protocols, and I would also add, as Commissioner Gjerdevig said, for the remainder at least of 2020.
Commissioner Simmons.
On the west side.
That's not in this one, because specifically what we were talking about originally was the concerns of larger gatherings, and those larger gatherings of this type, we were only talking about the Lights Plaza. We can go forward and look up protocols and get things ready for the other events that would happen on the north end of Cheyenne. But this one was the first, I was asked.
No, I get that, Tina, I just wanted to make it clear to the public that are watching.
Mm-hmm.
We can help them as well. So I want them to see this in the paper tomorrow, and here we go again, we're just worried about, because we're worried about the entire community. All the developers are as well. We want to make sure what we do.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons, and you are correct. There is a different set of protocols that will be worked on. I know Melissa was talking with you and Commissioner Gjerdevig, and she's worked on some things, and there's more to come on that. But because the venues are so different, we start here, and then those protocols we're working on as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Olson.
I'll yield to Commissioner Gjerdevig, then I'll...
One other question, I guess. It states here that these recommendations are for events at the Lights Plaza, but some of the events at the Lights Plaza, I'm not, just on an average night when you know, it's family fun night and there's probably going to be a few hundred people in the plaza. So again, I guess the question, or maybe it's a recommendation, would be, you know, is this for events that maybe we're planning to exceed a certain number of people, like 500 attendees or more?
Yep.
Because I'm not sure we want to be checking temperatures every night at the plaza if there's just 100 people wandering around in a huge facility.
Right.
So.
Thank you, Commissioner Gjerdevig. If you look under the pre-event general, it says that these are for events that are anticipated to have more than 500 attendees.
Okay. I have read that a little bit differently. I read that that's where the sign off from the city was for 500 attendees, but based off the very top comment that's underlined, allow events at the plaza with the following requirements, I would still assume, based off of this,
Commissioner Olson.
This is great discussion, and I just want to get my views out here. We're trying to prevent the disease, not have to fight it later. So we need to install these protocols, and we're going to have to make some hard decisions on whether or not we let these events take place or not, because we don't want to be second guessed by our grandkids, our kids, or even others around the nation, just like what happened out in Dickinson. Great. So I just have a couple of things here, if you just let me just read about a minute or two of his. Imagine you were born in 1900. When you're 14, World War I begins, and it ends when you're 18 with 22 million dead. Soon after, a global pandemic, the Spanish flu, appears that kills 50 million, and you're alive and you're 20 years old. When you're 29, you survive the global economic crisis that started with the collapse of the stock market, causing inflation, unemployment, famine, and you can add in the dirty 30s. When you're 33, the Nazis come into power. When you're 39, World War II begins, and it ends when you're 45 with 60 million dead. In the Holocaust, 60 million Jews die. Gasoline, tires, food, clothing, and other items were rationed. When you're 52, the Korean War begins. Nearly 3 million are dead, 36,000 Americans. When you're 64, the Vietnam War begins and ends when you're 75. 2 million more are dead, with 58,000 Americans. So a child born in 1985 thinks that their grandparents have no idea how difficult life is, but they have survived several wars and catastrophes. So today, we have all the comforts of a new world amid this pandemic, but yet we complain because we need to wear a mask. We complain because we must stay confined to our homes where we have food, electricity, running water, Wi-Fi, Netflix, and all other kinds of amenities. None of that existed back then. But humanity has survived those circumstances and never lost their joy of living. So just a small change in our perspective can generate miracles. We should be thankful that we are alive and do everything we need to do to protect ourselves and others. But do we really want to return to having our bars, restaurants, hair salons, schools closed because we're only concerned about our own lives and not those lives of others? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Commissioner George?
Mine has to do with costs. So we're talking about events taking over, large-scale city events too, right? Okay, so what are we currently paying West Fargo events to?
This particular item?
No, okay, all right, we'll save that for next time, okay.
Yeah, sorry, Commissioner George. Yeah, these are events that are being managed through West Fargo Events already.
Okay.
And the larger scale items go through another venue.
Right, so two separate, okay.
Yeah.
Any additional questions for Mrs. Fisk? Well, please, go ahead. Thank you. Is there a second?
These concerts make me nervous, but I think this is an attempt at trying to find the right balance, so I would second that motion.
Moved by Commissioner Simmons, second by Commissioner Gjerdevig. Is there any further discussion?
I will just say that I'm opposed to having concerts at this time at the lights due to the rise of the COVID numbers in our state, our county. We are the hot spot. we as the city commission need to, look at the public health and safety of everyone, and as our, chief of, the fire, last commission pointed out that if we lose one member, two members, the health and safety of everybody in the entire city is jeopardized by losing a couple of members to a battalion. And if it happens to our police squads, the same thing happened there. It isn't just because somebody missed out on a concert or something like that. And it affects everybody in that way. And we gotta look at it that way before we decide to vote.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson.
I'd just like to say, although I disagree with some of the language here, I'm usually open to a compromise. I appreciate what Commissioner Olson has to say, but I also believe mental health is very, very important. And for people to have things to look forward to and do as a community, we're social beings. We're meant to socialize. I think it's important. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
Just one clarification.
Commissioner Gjerdevig.
So we are, I mean, the requirement for these concerts is going to be to maintain social distance within the crowd.
As it's listed in here, yes.
Obviously, our society is very split on this issue as we continue to have an infection rate in Cass County. The Mrs. Fisk and I have 3 times a week. We're on the phone at 7:45 every morning, and we meet with Cass Public Health, the Mayor of Fargo, City Administrator of Fargo, County Administrator Robert Wilson, and the Cass County Commission President. And we are given updates brought forth by Cass Public Health 3 times a week. On Wednesdays, I'm on the COVID-19 Red River Valley Task Force, and at that time, state public health, healthcare professionals are continuously giving us, and believe me, our public is so split on this. The calls that I get, the emails that I get are amazing, shut everything down. At the present time, our superintendent of schools, Beth Sleddy, is in the midst of a task force of about 30, there's 32 or 33 of us, which I'm on, and we're meeting on a regular basis now, trying to prepare the various scenarios for our children going back to school, whether it's students in classrooms, students for distant learning, or a hybrid of very complicated. If one could imagine the logistics of putting 12,000 students and we provide busings for them, how are you going to get them to school with social distancing? How are you going to feed 12,000 students at lunchtime? They're going to start at 7 o'clock in the morning eating lunch and finish at 5:30 in the evening. So the logistics and the dynamics of what they're dealing with is phenomenal. As is the logistics of concerts and everything we'd want to do. Someone said to me this past week that has really stuck in my mind, and I would imagine that Miss George is going to love this part of it. Bernie, if you're going to err on personal freedoms.
Thank you.
Rather than, that we need to continue to get on with our lives. That being said, with all the healthcare information that I get, that's very difficult for me to do. So I am very grateful for Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Gjerdevig, to bring this line item forward, and their suggestions that our staff, our fire department, our police department, our administrative staff put together a document. So it is a difficult issue, and believe you me, we're all getting bent on from both directions on this. So anything else for Mrs. Fisk? I do have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Commissioner Olson.
So, the vote is to do what? To approve this protocol?
To approve as written with,
For the lights.
right.
For the lights. And so,
A POW one will be forthcoming.
let's just say it fails. Then what happens?
It's written right in here that, excuse me, that if it's found that they're not following the protocols as set forth, then we bring them back in, and there's that, and then we have the opportunity for the commission to either adjust what you allow or cancel all events.
I think you missed the point of the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What if we don't approve your protocol?
This fails.
What if we don't approve your protocol? Then what happens?
I have no idea.
Well, then it probably just,
That's what I was wondering. What's the next step if we?
It would stay as it is now
As it is
unless
now.
there's another motion brought forward
Okay.
to delineate and identify what we want to do.
I think this is putting us in a safer place than we are today by doing this. That's my personal opinion. Is it safety all the way? No, it's never gonna be. But it's safer than what we have today. That would just be a pretty easy statement to make, I guess, so.
Who's gonna determine if it's being met?
Where's the enforcement?
Probably, well, I'm
It'll,
sorry.
it'll, it
What's
would
the protocol
have-
enforcement? Go ahead, Commissioner Simmons, you have a point?
I would assume it would be you and Jim Larson.
It,
you know.
well, it would be me, Jim
Right.
does finance.
Yeah.
So,
right.
it would be me, and I would receive comments, and I'm sure I would receive information, and then I would have to find out, investigate what's going on, and then bring that forward to commission, if it was a valid concern.
I would say Jim because of the contractual part of it, the financing part. I mean, not what we're referring to.
There's your leverage.
You're right, yeah.
Your leverage for enforcement.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Again, we have a motion on the table to approve this recommendation for events at the lights. That's the issue. That's the point of the vote. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much, and I will incorporate those two comments as well, and send it back out. Thank you.
How's the commission doing? Everybody all right?
No,
You break? Okay.
Oh, you know what?
No?
Or, before we get nothing.
We'll do one more item, and then we're going to take another break, if that's all right, Commission?
It's like a hockey game.
Item number 13 is a revision of the Economic Development Advisory Committee's organizational guidelines. Lauren Orchard, Director of Economic Development for the City of West Fargo. Welcome.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis, and good evening, Commissioners. Tonight, I'm asking for your consideration of revised organizational guidelines for the City's Economic Development Advisory Committee, which is a group that previews business applications for city incentives and recommends action to the Commission. The revised guidelines were based off of the Planning and Zoning Commission's bylaws and create a more formalized structure to the committee, affirming their advisory status and adding a more robust conflict of interest section. The revised guidelines also have created 3-year terms and a 2-term limit for all members and have outlined a rotating executive committee, including a vice chair, chair, and past chair. In addition to these more refined terms, voting membership has been reduced from 12 to 6 individuals. The voting membership continues to represent the same industries, including banking, service, manufacturing, retail, and utilities, and has added a technology representative while eliminating the at-large seat. Overall, these revisions help clarify the role and structure of the Economic Development Advisory Committee and align the organizational guidelines with other city entities that report to the Commission. These guidelines have also been reviewed by legal counsel for compliance with North Dakota law and have been shared with commissioners for review and feedback, and I would recommend your approval.
Thank you, Ms. Orchard. Questions ever? Ms. George?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a real quick comment. I really like your jacket.
Oh, thanks. I got it on Etsy, so,
Awesome.
yeah.
There's no question.
Commissioner Simmons, you have a comment about Ms. Orchard's jacket?
I was just gonna make a motion to approve.
Just wanted to see if I could make him speechless for just I wanted Mark to be speechless for 1 minute, and it didn't work. All right. Commissioner Gjerdevig, please.
I second it.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Olson.
Just want to clarify a couple of things. So in the past, and the EDAC, when a entity was coming in, making an application for XYZ tip.
Sure.
They were able to present, and then they had to leave while the vote was taking place. Or if there was let's say there was two applicants for separate projects, neither one could be in the room at the time it was being presented. So will that all change now?
Yes, so these guidelines really do outline that these are public meetings, so that they would basically follow the same format that you all have for executive sessions as well. The guidelines even kind of say that executive sessions won't really be held. I think it's inappropriate for this committee to do those sorts of things, so everything would be public.
And just one other comment on the ex officio. They're there basically to observe and make recommendations. They can't make motions, vote, or anything like that.
Yes, that's correct.
Other questions? There's some language in here, and I just want to make sure that I understand it. Each business representative must conduct business in the city of West Fargo. Just conduct business. They don't have to have a physical presence in West Fargo as doing business?
That's how I understand it, yes.
Okay. Because obviously Xcel Energy nor Cass County Rural Electric their facilities are not in the city of West Fargo,
Right.
but they conduct business here.
Right.
Okay?
That would make sense, though, if they're on there.
Yeah.
Can I ask one
Please,
question?
Commissioner
Thank
Simmons,
you.
yes.
And just because Commissioner Olson kind of brought it to my memory, and I'm trying to think hard and I can't, but the ex officios, I know now I see that they're stated as commissioners as well.
Yeah.
Years ago, who can remember that? I always thought they voted. They had a vote. Do you remember John or anybody? Tina? Did it say that in the past paperwork as well, that they were ex officios?
I can answer as to what the old guidelines were like. They didn't clarify, I would say. They were listed, but the way that the format functioned for those guidelines didn't really clarify whether or not someone could vote.
I think we were always voters.
I think it depended on whose opinion it was that day, because it just really was not clarified in the guidelines.
Prior to me being elected, I served on this committee for 14 years, so term limits are a good idea. And over those 14 years, I only remember you coming once or twice. I mean, the city commission had a position.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, and I'm going to explain it. The commissioners had a position that they didn't want to unduly influence the discussion. And when I got elected, that's why, after serving for 14 years, that's why I removed myself immediately, because I thought it would be more appropriate that these great people that are volunteers don't be influenced by the public officials. They do. And to clarify, everybody at the table voted. All those years. There was never just 6 people voting. If 12 people showed up, 12 people voted. If 14 people showed up, 14 people absolutely did. Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve the changes that Ms. Orchard has outlined for the Economic Development Advisory Committee guidelines. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Ms. Orchard, I like your jacket too. Item number 14.
Break time?
Oh! Break time. We stand adjourned for 8 minutes. You're on the clock there, kiddo. When you say 5 minutes, they take 10. When you say 10 minutes, they take 15. So
How fast is the third period gonna go?
Let me look. So. Report by.
If that's gonna be.
Well, he.
Thank you for answering my question before I
Turn it on.
I think the library presentation should go something like this. We have a library. It's good. The end.
The end. I told her, I said, here's my report.
I just, really basic. We have a library.
Beautiful book and all that.
You know, if Sandra was here, we'd be here for another hour.
Oh my God, yeah. Isn't that the truth?
There was someone who couldn't tell the difference between details and priorities.
Yep, exactly.
you shut it off? Oh, okay. I didn't catch it at the last break either, it was off, and I didn't catch it like way into the, but surprised they didn't tell me.
We'll reconvene the meeting, please. At this point in time, we are on item number 14, the West Fargo Public Library 2019 Annual Report.
Hello.
This is Carissa Hansen.
Good evening, Commission President Dardis and
Director of Libraries for the City of West Fargo. Hi.
Hi. The home stretch. I'm here before you tonight to present the West Fargo Public Library's 2019 Annual Report, much later than I anticipated due to everything that's happened with the pandemic, and it does feel a little weird to be looking back at 2019, given that the world is just such a different place in just a few short months in 2020. But 2019 was a big year for the West Fargo Public Library, and it was a year of a lot of change. In December 2019, not only did we get a new director, we also began an internal reorganization into 3 defined service areas that would allow us to operate more efficiently and provide mature library services in a city that, as you know, has seen such incredible growth over the last decades. That same month, we also implemented a new library management software, which is a huge undertaking. That's a project that libraries undertake probably at most once a decade. And so that was something that really allowed us to modernize our internal operation and our online services to the public. And then on top of that, it was a record-breaking year for public programming at the WFPL. Here is our new organizational structure as it is today that we started working on towards the end of 2019, and so we now operate in 3 distinct service areas: programming, technical services, and patron services. And our library staff currently includes 11 full-time staff and 12 part-time staff. So the programming team provides educational and recreational classes, cultural events, and literacy programs for residents of all ages. The technical services team develops our print and electronic collections, and the patron services team offers direct customer service to library patrons, so they do things like help patrons use the library, provide reading recommendations, help people use technology, search for jobs, access ebooks, and they also manage the circulation of our materials. So everybody on our team now has a distinct operational role, yet we still have cross-departmental and collaborative work in key areas like collection development and direct customer service to the public. Your packet contains detailed statistics about circulation and usage of library services, so I'm not going to go into detail with all of that tonight, but there are a few that I do want to highlight. So in 2019, we had over 70,000 visits to the library, which is up 35% over the last 5 years. In total, our items circulated over 145,000 times, which is up 16% in the last 5 years, and our electronic materials, so ebook, e-audiobooks, online movies, music, other items circulated over 37,000 times, which is a 191% increase over the last 5 years. So we've really seen a huge explosion in interest in electronic content, but still increases in folks visiting the library and checking out physical materials. And it's interesting because, to my surprise, during our closure due to COVID, we saw an increase in usage in our electronic content, but not huge gains. What we did get were phone calls and emails and Facebook messages. When are you going to start curbside pickup? When can I pick up my holds? And when are you going to open? So e-content is hugely popular and important, but it's definitely not the only way that people in West Fargo are using their library. In 2019, our collection totaled over 130,000 items, with about 1/3 of those items being electronic items. And in an effort to keep pace with voracious readers, we added approximately 6,800 items to our physical collection in 2019. And additionally, we continued to explore non-traditional collections. So in 2019, we added things like mobile Wi-Fi hotspots and book club kits to our circulating collections for checkout. And these collections, these non-traditional collections, are so important. So for instance, 3,500 households in the West Fargo School District had no in-home broadband internet access in 2018, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And so we purchased just a few of these mobile Wi-Fi hotspots in 2019, and not one of them has really been in the library for more than a day since we started circulating them, not a day or two between checkouts, during the entirety of 2019. So they've been really, really popular. In 2019, our programming team saw a record-breaking year with an annual attendance of over 15,000, and programming is absolutely our strongest growth area in the library, with a 64% increase in attendance in the last 5 years. And programming is so important to library services because it's what brings people together to learn, and it's really what makes the library a community hub, and it's the way to ensure residents opportunities to develop literacies needed for success in life. However, programming is also a really challenging aspect of our operation for us right now because we just lack the FTE and square footage and space configuration to meet that kind of demand. In 2019, we saw an increased interest in 2 key programs, so book clubs for adults and story times for kids, so much so that we added a 3rd book club to our offerings, and we saw a doubling of our weekly storytime attendance when we split our storytime into 1 storytime per week for infants and 1 weekly storytime for preschoolers. And the need for programs related to early literacy development in West Fargo is really strong. To serve this demographic best and really meet kids where they are, we looked outside the walls of the library and served 18 different daycares each month through offsite story times. In 2019, our summer reading program theme was A Universe of Stories, which consisted of all things space and astronauts and STEM, and the primary goal of our annual summer reading program is to keep kids reading during those summer months, to avoid learning loss that can occur when kids aren't in school. And in 2019, we certainly achieved this goal, and it was really a banner year for our summer reading program. We had over 900 kids register, over 10,000 hours read, and nearly 1,900 program attendees in the months of June and July. I am a firm believer that library services are much better and much more responsive to needs when we collaborate with other entities, and this past year we were really excited to participate in many on-site and off-site events with community partners. So we hosted tours of the library for 2nd graders, and we hosted a government careers day for middle schoolers along with the rest of our fellow City of West Fargo departments. We also popped up at West Fest and the Street Fair and hosted story time on the Little Red Reading Bus. Now I'm going to do the thing that you don't do during an annual report presentation, which is talk about the current year, but I feel like I would be totally remiss if I didn't acknowledge the amazing and above and beyond service that our library staff have provided during the COVID-19 outbreak. There was literally not one single day when service stopped. And on Monday, March 16th, before we closed, I basically sat our team down and said, we have 8 hours to figure out how to do all of this remotely because we're closing and we have no idea how long that's going to last or when we're going to be back in the building. And that same week, our staff were answering phone calls from the public at home and getting people library cards from home and providing online programs from their kitchens and living rooms and bedrooms. So it was just really amazing to see how fast they moved, and I cannot emphasize enough what an amazing job they've done, so they deserve so much praise for their work. Over the last 4 months, we launched a 100% virtual summer reading program, curbside pickup of our physical items, and started offering curbside delivery of books to West Fargo kids' homes in partnership with the Little Red Reading Bus. In the month of June, we saw nearly 500 people register for our first ever virtual summer reading program, and at times we had up to 30 calls an hour to our main phone line from folks wanting to reserve and pick up items for checkout and our programming kits. And I just want to share with you a few pieces of public feedback that we received during our closure. One patron wrote to us, "To all the library staff, thank you for all of your willingness to help me get books, a lifeline at this time, and much appreciated." Another person wrote to us, "Thank you so much for the fun summertime activity kits. My kiddos have been enjoying them. That combined with the summer reading challenges has proven to be a big hit in our household. We got our Red Reading Bus book bundles last night and are reading away this hot morning. Thanks again for all the services you are providing to the community. The read alouds and the Facebook pages are another favorite I forgot to mention. Your hard work is not going unnoticed." During a curbside pickup, a mom shared that her son was loving the summer reading program. She said that he did not enjoy school from home and never wanted to read, but now he asks to read and loves to earn buttons and prizes. So this is why we do what we do. One thing we learned during this pandemic is that the library is a lot more than its building. It's the people who occupy it, it's the staff, and it's the residents of West Fargo, but the library as a place is also really, really important. For instance, during our closure, we weren't able to serve those who rely on our staff in person and rely on our technology in the library, and even something as simple as browsing in our space. People missed that a lot, we heard in the last week. So library service is really about both the people and the place, and it's not either or, which is why we were super excited to reopen last week and see everybody in our space again. So thank you for your time, and I'm here happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanson. Questions? Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 15 is the Sand Hills 4th Edition, rezoning from agricultural to light industrial. Ordinance is number 1159. Mr. Sober.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is second reading, first reading, and final plat approval. We're at the July 6th meeting. That's kind of unconventional to do that final plat approval. We did that to accommodate some developer requests. It was just a small lot that was left over that was not zoned, that was not purchased, and tonight is proposed second zoning to wrap that up to go from agricultural to light industrial.
Reading?
This would be the second reading. No public hearing is scheduled, and I'm available for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Soberg? Again, we're on this, this is the second reading of the Sand Hills 4th Edition, rezoning from agricultural to light industrial. Commissioners, do you have any questions of Mr. Soberg?
I move we approve the second reading.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Gjerdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading of the Sand Hills 4th Edition, rezoning from agricultural to light industrial. Ordinance 1159. Is there any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Sober. Item number 16 is to hold a public hearing for partial vacation of park property on Elmwood Court Addition and final plot approval based on conditions listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to probably ask John to tag team a little bit of this, but much discussion has previously occurred regarding the future use of this property by the Park District, whom has determined that a portion of the lot is no longer of use to them. Prior to this plat, the Park District had initially pursued a rezoning, but has since decided it's best to leave that portion of the application up to a future party if one so chooses to purchase the lot. Tonight's proposal is to approve a subdivision, which would leave the park with 3 lots rather than the existing 2 highlighted on the map. The western lot would shrink, and it will accommodate both the existing path and a newly created access road to Elmwood South. The middle lot is proposed to be marketed, but would remain zoned public until which time someone may choose to bring forward an application for development. Park District proposes to maintain a lot along the river to preserve tree cover for Elmwood Park and a potential for a trail connection as well to Cheyenne Street. As part of the application for subdivision, the city will also need to hold a public hearing to consider the partial vacation of dedicated parkland, which I've highlighted in the previous plat. Do we have a public hearing scheduled tonight, though?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. It's not listed in the agenda, is it?
No, it's not. You just need to open a public
Okay, so
hearing.
I would recommend the chair open a public hearing for that partial vacation, and I'm available for questions. Barb Erbstosser is also here and has been waiting through the meeting in case you have any questions as well of her. And again, the partial vacation of the park, I'd probably defer some of those questions to John. However, I did include in your packet the original subdivision of Elmwood Courts, and where park is signified on that plat. I have that highlighted, as well as the dedication statement on that plat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Soberg. Are there any questions of Mr. Soberg? Ms. George?
Yeah, this doesn't really constitute a question. I just want to say that this is my block, and I'm sure the commissioners will all vote for you. This is one I can't vote on because I like the park and I know my neighbors like the park, and just what they've already done to it, I absolutely despise. So I want the park district actually to know that that road they built through my backyard and the trees they cut down, I really dislike a lot. So I won't vote for this, but I understand everybody else probably will.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Mr. Solberg? Hearing none, we'll close the regular agenda and we move into a public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this item this evening? Is there anyone that would like to speak to this item this evening? Again, the public hearing for partial vacation of park property on Elmwood Court addition. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this item? District West Fargo Parks Administrator Barbara Stasser. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you, President Dardis and members of the commission. I just want to, we've had this on the docket for a while, I guess, and planning and zoning, and we've been at City Commission once, and we've really carefully thought through this process, I feel. We've actually had a couple public meetings on this with the neighbors in the neighborhood. We realized that you know, we had a plan going forward, and because of the public meetings, we really went back and we took a look at it. We really tried to answer a lot of the questions. There were a couple ladies here tonight that live in the twin homes over there, and it was getting a little too late for them to stay, and so I assured them I would give them a call after the meeting tonight to let them know what had happened. But they were very vocal throughout the whole process, as a lot of the neighbors were, and I know there's a lot of changes that have happened over there. One of the things that we looked at is we actually looked at selling the entire parcel, but keeping the bike path in there. And so we actually stepped back and took a look at this and thought, you know, how can we compromise with the residents, and what can we do to kind of find a compromise? So I worked for the Park District for 32 years, and have seen a lot of change in this area. And back when we got this property back in 2002, we were not on the verge of growth, and a lot of things have changed. But you know, looking at South Elmwood Park, we have one way in and one way out, and that's a little scary to think of, having, you know, all 5 diamonds full of kids. If we ever had a fire in the trees, or if we ever had an emergency situation with the weather or anything like that. So we decided to take that opportunity and put in a park road through there to open it up to 19th Avenue. And it really seemed to make a lot of sense to do that. The 2 residents that were here tonight have told me they've appreciated a lot of the improvements that have happened. Of course, I don't speak on their behalf. I'm just telling you what they had told me. But we've also done a lot of other nice changes in Elmwood with bike paths and trying to open it up a little bit more, and try to increase the usership of South Elmwood Park as well, too. So I feel like we reached a good compromise on it. We're looking at the 116,000 square feet of property to market that. Again, the access was really tough for us, and I hope it's something that you will take a look at tonight, and we'd appreciate your consideration. And I really appreciate being able to appear before you tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Erbstasser. Ms. George.
Thank you. Can I ask you specifically what those ladies here, more what they were saying, since I'm guessing they probably live on my street? I'm wondering what they specifically said.
I didn't catch the first part.
What those ladies, I want specifically what those ladies expressed, like what their concerns were specifically. I'd like to know, since they're my neighbors.
Initially, what people were concerned about was, and this is a very valid point, how many park districts want to give up on green space? It was really the last thing that we wanted to do. But with you know, the development of Cheyenne Street, 19th Avenue, we've owned out to a lot of that property in 2002 when there was absolutely nothing in that area, and there was no traffic, and you know, all the development was seeming to come from down south. And really, it was kind of a not in my backyard type of situation where they just didn't want to see the change happen. And I guess I could even go back, because I've been here so long. I was here even before any of the Elmwood Court was built around. So there's been a lot of change, of course, and I think there was just uneasiness that it would change and it would be different. But we've tried to take that opportunity and try to enhance it for the neighborhood. And yeah, we hate to cut down any trees, but we're also planting probably over 50 trees. We didn't take down a lot of trees. We cleaned up some of the shelter belt, but we're also bringing in many more trees than what we've taken down.
Okay. Because I literally stare at that right out my back window, and when those big trees went down, like, I literally cried, because those trees, I mean, they're gone. They can never be replaced, because it's going to take how many years to replace those. And now we have a through street that goes through all night too, so now the cars drive through and I have lights coming into my window that I didn't have before. And now it's a little more dangerous, I feel, because since it's a through street, all the kids that go on the bike trail and everything, you know, it's just one more thing to worry about. I do like the bike trails in there. I do appreciate those new ones. That's the positive, but otherwise I was not thrilled, to see it literally in my backyard.
So one thing to add to that, a couple things aren't done. The project's not quite done yet. In fact, we're really in phase one. In phase one, the speed bumps aren't in yet because we need to close the road down for a week. And the other thing that's not happened, there's gates up at the north end, but the gates on the south end aren't in, and we're going to be closing that. We have night security that go around and close off those types of things.
It would be better if it was closed at night.
Yeah, yep, definitely.
Anything else? We're still in the public hearing. Questions for Mrs. Herbstasser? I can, with regard to your question, Ms. George, one of the ladies called me early on, and she was very unhappy.
Yep.
And I gave her Barb's phone number to have a discussion.
Yep.
She didn't understand that the city didn't own the property.
Yep.
And so, the concern was change. We don't want to change. So
we've improved some of the drainage back through there, which has been a real problem as well. And I also have Matt Welly from Moore Engineering, who is our engineer on the project. If there's any technical questions, we did address a lot of the drainage issues as well too. So
it's a nice area, the bike path, the walking path. I let a senior citizen walk back there last year, and it was great. I mean, it's great space. It really is. Anything else in the public hearing? Anybody else like to speak to this item? Okay. I declare the public hearing closed. We're back on the regular agenda. Are there any other questions of Mr. Soberg? Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one actually of Barb. Barb, if you could, I wanted to talk to the commission rather than the public hearing portion. But it's my fault, I know, but I'm a little confused as to what is the plans there? I mean, you're going to put a road in.
okay, we put let's see, do we have the map up?
Is it all the way through that road already?
The road is already in. The path is in. We maintain keeping the path in. I'm not handy with that stuff. So we kept the property to the west.
Right.
Do you have a pointer?
Yeah, this picture isn't current at all. It's
okay.
unfortunate.
So we kept the rectangle to the west, most of that.
Okay.
And then there's kind of an eyebrow along the river that we've kept as well too.
Right up in here.
So the road will, okay, and but then you plan on selling that off, is that?
Yes, the 116,000 square feet we're looking at selling off.
I suppose it's none of my business, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, because I remember a couple of years ago,
Absolutely.
over the years we talked about this. I thought that the park couldn't sell that property because it was donated.
Well, maybe I'd defer that to John.
Mr. Shockley.
To answer that.
We'll defer that question to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, members of the Commission. So that is why we're doing a partial vacation tonight. You have to vacate part of the park property. The Park District did maintain most of the park, and that's the eyebrow shape. There was several discussions about what size of park property to maintain, but they are just doing a partial vacation. They're maintaining a significant chunk of park property, which is 45,300 square feet of park property, and then doing a partial vacation of the remainder of that. So I think visually the line would cut between the big shed and the old house there.
Oh, okay. So again, it's probably none of our business as a commission, but you're the one that's got to answer to the donor
Right.
But you're not, or if you're going with their wishes or whatever, that's your concern, not ours, I guess, so.
So I'll just tell you this, if we're successful tonight, we are looking at marketing the piece of property. We are very concerned about who our neighbor will be and what that will be. We've had probably a dozen inquiries because it's been very public, it's been in the Forum and it's been in the Pioneer. We are not looking at, well, I should say, we are looking to have a good neighbor there. We're not interested in anything that's going to generate high traffic, and going to be, you know, that's a tough site to kind of get in and out of, and that's what happened with us, is that we had, off of Cheyenne Street, the entrance where you can see the road, we were not able to access that, but we're actually now able to access, off of part of the road, coming in off of 19th into that property. So we're going to be very concerned about what that's going to be. We did back off on the zoning piece, and that will be between the person who buys it and
I was gonna say, that's
city.
where we had the problem,
right.
the zoning. So you're gonna leave it zoned as it is, you just
Yes.
wanna vacate that?
Yeah.
Okay,
And that'll be the next.
okay,
So,
thanks.
so the commission will have a review of that, of how it, the land use part of it, as long as it follows West Fargo 2.0. Thank you, Barb. Okay, again, we're on the regular agenda. We have a number of items here. Two parts. Jim, would you clarify again the action items? Partial vacation is one part of it?
Yes, and again, Commissioner President, I wanted to note, we did have comment during the rezoning, but we did not have comment during the plat. So, that's why, you don't have any public comment before you, because they changed the application.
Thank
to
you.
Residents that were in here earlier, I did speak with them, but they provided no public comment. There's, partial vacation of park property, which is part of the final plat approval. So really, all you need is final plat approval with conditions listed in the staff report.
All right, very good. If you didn't catch that, we're doing a final plot approval of this property. What's your pleasure?
I move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Simmons. Been moved and seconded to approve the final plot of the park property, the Elmwood Court Edition. Is there any further discussion?
I just have one question for
Commissioner Olson.
On our agenda, it's page 185, and I don't, it's the Elmwood Court 4th Edition. I just want to make sure I know what's being vacated, what's being kept, you know, all that stuff. I don't know if you can pull up that schematic, that drawing there, that,
Yeah, and help us define that eyebrow, if you will, that everybody keeps referring to.
So Elmwood Court 4th Edition is the new plat. There is a dotted line within that that signifies what was the previous, I believe, lot 60 one of the later lots of Elmwood Court Edition. That was this lot right here, which is lot 1 and a portion of the other lot 2, was a piece of property that they owned by deed. The Park District actually paid for that. This larger lot here, which was just the second lot that we're talking about, was a part that was dedicated to them through the plat of Elmwood Court Edition, which was through a park dedication. They're splitting a part of that lot that they own by deed and putting that into this new lot 2, and then taking off a part of that, and then are going to maintain ownership of lot 3 as the park. So it's a partial vacation of a previously dedicated park lot. So there's pieces of it within it. 2 lots turned into 3. They're going to market 1 lot, which is lot 2, block 1 of Elmwood Court 4th Edition. But they'll maintain ownership of lot 1 and lot 3.
so the stuff in the middle is basically that odd shaped thing is what's going to be possibly
That's what
sold.
they're proposing to market. However, it's still zoned public. There will be no allowed use there other than public use until this body rezones it to another potential use.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Questions for Mr. Solberg? Proceed to vote, please. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Item number 17 is the second reading of the rezoning and final plot approval for lots 1 through 4 and 20 through 22, Block 8 of Meadowbrook Park subdivision. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. This plat and rezoning had previously been heard at the January 20th, 2020 City Commission meeting. Plat has since been reflected to include the easement, which was discussed at that time for a water line within the Meadowbrook Park development, and development will need to address or just avoid the easement altogether. Staff is recommending approval of the plat and second reading of the rezoning from agricultural to light industrial after receiving the necessary recommendations of plat approval. Of course, city engineer will have an opportunity to hold a signature until all of the drainage plan and necessary requirements are filed. But we're comfortable with the plat, so I'm available for any questions. There is no public hearing scheduled for this.
Questions for Mr. Solberg?
I'll move to approve the replat and rezoning with the 6 conditions that are listed in your recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson moved. Commissioner Gjerdevig seconds with the approval of rezoning and the final plat with the 6 conditions. Any further discussion?
Just to clarify, in the recommendation it says that the water service lines will make, I can make that part of the...
Yes, sir. Second, do you approve of that?
That's rain, isn't it?
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business.
Might be snow by the time we get out of here.
That's not funny. Item number 18, approval of a conditional use permit for 501 26th Avenue East, Lot 2, Block 7 of South Pond at the Preserve, First Edition. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. This application the applicant is proposing 2 wall signs on their building, which increases beyond the allowable signage within the P Public Facilities District. An exception, however, is made to allowable signage within the district if it is considered as a conditional use, as provided for in 4-460.9.3.c of City Ordinances. Proposal is to add 2 lighted channel letter signs on the westerly and northerly elevations, each being 88 square feet. This does not exceed the C-Light Commercial District standards. Notices were sent to property owners within 350 feet, and no comments have been received to date. Planning Commission held a public hearing and considered the application at the July 14th, 2020 meeting. They are forwarding their recommendation for approval. They provided following findings to justify their decision because they felt it was important to make sure that they don't create precedents that doesn't make sense. The 3 findings that they found were that the signage is stationary, meaning it's not an EMC, Electronic Message Center. The sign is not facing residential property, and the proposed sign size does not exceed what would be approved in the C-Light Commercial District. The C-Light Commercial District is sort of the height of what our on-premise signage would be. So they thought that was important to pass that along to you. I am here for any questions. A public hearing is not scheduled for a conditional use permit, to clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Questions for Mr. Solberg?
Would make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner George. Been moved and seconded for the approval of conditional use permit at 501 26th Avenue East. Representative of Indigo Signworks is here. Representative, obviously, Barb Erbstosser being the Director of Parks. And I will point out that I will recuse myself of this vote due to my association with Indigo Signworks. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 19 is the approval of a conditional use permit for 1215 19th Avenue East, Lot 2, Block 1 of Burlington Addition. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. This applicant is proposing to construct a residential area identification sign on a vacant lot adjacent to a rental townhome development off of 19th Avenue East. The lot has sat vacant for many years and is part of the PUD. However, the increased signage for residential area identification is provided for as a conditional use within the city's sign code, specifically 4-460.9.1.d. Further, the proposed sign is illuminated and facing a residential district, which requires consideration as a conditional use under 4-460.7.14. The proposed sign is 85.5 square feet and contains a small LED strip to illuminate it, so it's not extremely bright, not facing a lot of residences. Notices were sent to property owners within 350 feet, however, and no comments were received. Planning Commission held a public hearing and is considered the application at their July 14th, 2020 meeting, and is hereby forwarding their recommendation for approval. They did not feel it necessary to include findings on this one because it is quite a bit smaller than we have approved in previous residential area identification signs. I'm available for any questions.
This is on a private lot?
It is on a private lot, yeah. And
I'd
one
make a motion
question
to
that
approve.
the Planning Commission did point out is they were concerned that this lot is developable. It still is developable. A sign doesn't really take up a lot of excavation, so they're not too concerned about this coming out of potential development.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second?
Second. Oh.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded for a conditional use permit for 1215 19th Avenue East, Lot 2, Block 1 of Burlington Addition. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Page 2. Item number 20. Approval for hiring West Fargo Events to coordinate large City of West Fargo community events. Mrs. Richard.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. It's my honor to have the final staff item on the list, and how nice that it matches my age. That's pretty exciting too.
20? 20?
20, yep.
On the record now.
I am here today to ask for approval to hire West Fargo Events to coordinate large-scale community events that the City of West Fargo has been historically planning for the last 25, 30 years. I have a little bit of background on the discussion, and then we'll open it up for conversation. Obviously, the last few months, there's been lots of discussions about events related to COVID and how they happen, and the decision-making process that goes into determining if they're safe, what are the protocols to follow to make them safe. There was a moment where Commissioner Gjerdevig and Simmons really took the reins to make sure that we could make cruise nights happen and came up with a great plan to pass by staff. During a discussion about those events in particular, we transitioned into a long-term discussion about events and who is most appropriate to coordinate those, and the different pros and cons of having it be a function of the City of West Fargo or a function of another organization that we hire, similar to what we have going on for programming in the lights and the POW MIA Plaza. West Fargo Events has obviously done a great job in those two plazas programming it, coming up with a great mix of events, identifying vendors, sponsors, a variety of those cogs in the wheel for event planning that have to happen. And so during that discussion, we talked about West Fargo, if this was the time for West Fargo Events to also take over these large-scale community events that the City of West Fargo has traditionally organized. In the last 3 years, it's been done through the Communications Department. So Commissioners Gjerdevig and Simmons asked me to bring this up tonight for discussion. And specifically that we would be expanding West Fargo Events' responsibilities to include these events. And the specific events that I'm talking about are the West Fargo Street Fair, the 4 cruise nights that happen during the summer, Taste of West Fargo, and West Fest. I tried to anticipate some of your questions, so I will go through my anticipated questions. How will this work? Well, one thing about all of these events is that one of the primary roles that the City of West Fargo has had while we plan these events is to do fundraising and identify sponsorship. So each of these events actually holds some funds with money in them right now that have been carryovers from previous years of sponsorships that weren't entirely used, plus sponsorships that have been raised. So right now at this time, these events all have buckets of money that are there for the execution of the events. I asked Jim because Commissioner George already asked the question, so we'll address that. West Fargo Events currently is paid $14,000 a month for programming for the two plazas, and then another $8,600 for managing the parking garage and the maintenance and upkeep for those facilities. When we were having this discussion, Mike Amundsen with West Fargo Events was in the room, and the discussion was that at this year there would not be a need for increased charges from West Fargo Events for a couple of reasons, but one of the main ones is this will be a transition year if they were to take it over, so my staff and my department will still be heavily involved in helping to pass the baton and get those events executed. We also talked that because the West Fargo Street Fair is August 1st, which is fast approaching, that my staff would be wholly in charge of that event in and of itself, and that would not be on the docket for West Fargo events. So we're really talking about the two remaining cruise nights, West Fest, and then Taste of West Fargo. We might see contract adjustments with West Fargo events in future years, but this year, at least for 2020, we're not looking at any kind of adjustment, and it would fall under that contract. I think the next major question that might come is, well, if your staff is spending so much time on this, what will your staff do? If I can estimate, I would say 30% of our communications and community services coordinator, 30% of her time in a year is spent on events, and then about 15% of my time a year is spent on events. There's two areas where I see we would really transition that time and help further the communications department in servicing the city. One of those areas is working with Lauren Orchard for the Downtown Business Association to help strengthen that and strengthen the overall area with branding and marketing and publicizing that event. We've started to do some brainstorming as to how Addie can really step in and help with that. Addie is who's serving in that position currently, and I think that's probably a similar amount of time as to what the events are right now. What I had envisioned is that there has been lots of questions about how different events are positioned and how different things are communicated through West Fargo events about events that happen because of that $14,000 a month. So I see my time transitioning to more of helping with that contract and making sure that we're fulfilling that way, that is all working in a way that you guys see value in that programming and everything, and that the community knows that this is a City of West Fargo investment. The other major thing is all the departments, public and community engagement is really important, and it becomes really important on project areas too, where we want that public input. So as we look at improving public input and transparency, we would just take that time to help strengthen our department and those resources that we're offering to everyone else. I also want to share that West Fargo Events Board has heard the concept of taking over the events, but they didn't feel like it was appropriate to take any action until they heard from the City Commission. And so if you have questions about what that discussion was like, I'm sure Commissioner Simmons can help fill in those blanks as the president of that board. With that, Tina and I are available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Richards, excuse me. Questions? Commissioner Simmons.
So I'll just fill in a little bit about what happened at the West Fargo Events Board meeting. That was that it was, we determined that we didn't want to take an action, like Melissa said, specifically because the mayor wasn't at that meeting as well. And we wanted the commission alone to decide where this goes without any influence from the West Fargo Board of Events. So that's kind of where we got to. I thought it was a good idea, and so that's why we're here.
Commissioner Olson.
So you said West Fargo Events did not take any action?
Did not take any action. We wanted this commission to take the action, not, to entice it in any way. We wanted to just be...
But they're okay with doing it?
Absolutely okay with it. Well, All of them but one, we haven't talked to yet.
He's looking at me.
But,
I'm very much against this.
Yep.
And I'll tell you why. Very simply, West Fargo Events only has 2 voting members from the city of West Fargo, this gentleman and myself. There's 2 park board people that vote. There's 2 West Fargo Public School people that vote, and there's 2 people at large. So our major community events are going to have 2 votes. That's the way the board is set up.
I just want to clarify that those events are coordinated through the contract with the city of West Fargo. So we will be the client, and we will still be directing those events and directing how they're formulated. It'll be our client request to them as to how they're executed. So
the West Fargo events personnel report to our board of directors, and we have 2 out of the 8 votes. This has not been discussed with me, and I am adamantly against it. I think it's a mistake. There, you asked.
There you go. No, that's totally fine. That's what we're here for. So, again, unfortunately, that was my fault. I apologize. I should have called you and talked to you a little bit. But the board did recognize what we're doing, and they did, without taking a vote, say that it was good. As far as accountability, that doesn't change. The buck stops with us. The commission still has the final say whether we do something or not. So,
the commission has no direction over the West Fargo Events Board.
In our contracts, we do, Mayor, in our contracts.
Only from a financial standpoint. The West Fargo Events can still act independently from the city of West Fargo.
They now have to go by these COVID guidelines though as well, right? I mean, that's what we just enacted.
Mrs. Fisk.
President Dartis, one difference that we have here is that the plaza spaces that we have and what the school for their hockey facility have, they're managing spaces. Those are spaces and they have to bring in events to those spaces. What we would be doing here is a little different in the way that we would say these are specific City of West Fargo events and we want you to manage them, but we are here to guide and to make sure that they're done the way we want them to be done. So it's almost like a second portion to the agreement. We would have to almost, I don't know if we'd have to write something more up, but it's different than managing a plaza. These are events that are like, they're specific to what, I mean, they can't all of a sudden, we can't say we want you to take over West Fest and all of a sudden they call it something different. It's the city said that's what we would hire them specifically for, is that particular thing. So I don't know if that helps you at all, but I think it's more of a control that we would have because we aren't asking them to create the events. The events are there.
West Fargo Events has 3 employees, and we're counting on them being the large investments that we have in these public spaces to do the scheduling and to have the content and the community engagement on that. So then we're going to be faced with, you're correct, Mrs. Richard, on the fact that there's not a change maybe in what the contributions are, or the financial support that we have presently. But how are those 3, Mike, Joe, and this other young lady that's just been hired, how are they possibly going to work with all of the vendors that these ladies work with on a regular basis for street fair or that with 3 employees? So they're going to come back to us next year. There's no doubt that there's going to be an expansion of staff that's going to be needed for West Fargo Events to run this. It's just going to be a circle, just like this. There's going to be a transfer of all the time that has been spent. It's going to come over to this. And so then, and Commissioner Gjerdevig and I have had this conversation, $14,000 for A, $5,000, that's $19,000 a month just for what we're doing now. $19,000 a month is a lot of dollars. And there's no doubt that we're headed for an increase. I mean, it just, common sense would reason it to that. Hang on for next year. Let's go to Mrs. Fisk first.
I want to frame where kind of this came from. The city historically, you know, Melissa said these events have been going on for a long time, but the city historically did not manage these events. These events were managed by a chamber. And when I started 10 years ago, the only thing that the city did was had some of our staff sit in on their volunteer meetings to organize the event. We didn't run it, we didn't own it, we didn't manage the funds, nothing. And then they asked us to just manage the money. And then over the course of time, all of a sudden we were doing the entire thing. Same with Cruise Night. Cruise Night was ran by Toppers, and we didn't have anything to do with it. And then they asked us to help coordinate and manage the funds, take the money in, get the money out. And over the course of time, a few years ago, all of a sudden, it's all ours. And I think the question came up because should we be in the event business? Should our city employees be going door to door and asking for donations from businesses to run an event? And this, you have to stop and think. The events Melissa's talking about only benefit Main Avenue to 7th. What about when you get someone from down at the Boulevard shops or down further south on 32nd and say, where's our event? Where are you going to help us out at? That was where the concern came in, where we were like, well, maybe we need to step back and get out of this event business. And that's the context of the discussion. It isn't that we want those events to go away. It was that it gets complicated when you get responses from businesses that say, you're killing my business because you canceled the event because of a pandemic. And it's like, so, I mean, and that's what makes it so difficult. I understand the frustration and everything, but that's the context of the conversation, just so you know.
I think Tina brings up a really good point as far as should the city be in an event planning business? And I think she's right as far as we shouldn't, but maybe we don't give it to West Fargo Events either. Maybe Toppers wants it. Or can we look at something like that to just have a private entity, or whatever car club in the city wants it? I mean, can we look at something like that? So the city's out of it, West Fargo's out of it, taxpayer dollars are out of it altogether.
I think the problem with that, Commissioner George, is that if we said that to the Toppers, they would probably, I'm just going to assume that they'd pull because they can't, all these events, fortunately, I would think, are so big that our staff or our public works, Melissa, are always going to have to be involved. Always. Our police, they're always, no matter what we do, we're going to have some involvement with this. But to the point I think that Tina's making is, and I don't know if I agree with this or not because that has always been my I love our city doing this stuff. But are we in an event business? I don't know. I mean, we probably shouldn't be. I like it, but we probably shouldn't be. But at least this way we're moving away from that. I understand what the mayor's saying, definitely. You bet West Fargo Events is going to come back next year. Of course they're going to want more and deserve more if they're going to do that much more work. Our question is how we're going to pay for it then. Where are the funds going to come from, to me?
President Dartis and Commissioner Simmons, one more comment I want to make you is that, and we could calculate this out, but we're actually funding these events with overtime from our general fund. We've got police force being paid with tax dollars, overtime for the events. We've got fire department being paid overtime for these events. We have got other staff that aren't salaried that are getting paid overtime for events, sanitation department. So we're funding, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but bear in mind when you're talking about good use of tax dollars and budgets and so on and so forth, we are funding a lot of overtime for these events out of our general fund.
But that won't change. It won't change because the agreement that West Fargo Events would have to have with the city of West Fargo is that the city of West Fargo is going to provide public works to closing off streets, barricades, garbage pickup. All of those types of things are going to continue. You're not going to have them work independently for that. They're still going to need, Chief Boyer and his team. Chief Fuller is going to still have his medical teams on site. So now we have a third-party group organizing with our department heads. That's just going to complement. It's going to extend the communication time and all of those types of things. Because is a person from, Mr. Amundsen's a wonderful young man, does a beautiful job for West Fargo Events. I'm his biggest fan. But he's going to direct the chief of police, or he's going to direct the fire chief, or he's going to direct Mr. Anvik from Public Works. No, we can't have a third-party outside person.
I don't think he's going to direct anybody, Mayor. I think that
he's running the events. They're not involved.
Oh, no, they will be involved to the point where, I mean, if this is a good example. If the fire chief and the police chief say, we don't feel safe having this event, we don't have the event. They have that. We're not losing that authority here. We're just basically taking it, quite honestly, off Melissa's hands and putting it where...
We have the most beautiful, wonderful, creative people working in West Fargo, including this lady standing in front of us. So, 20-year-old, excuse me, girl. But say, for example, the way that we've been doing the street fair, or the way we've been doing cruise night. Mike Amundsen is equally talented, and he decides that he wants to start cruise night at 11 o'clock in the afternoon. He's authorized to run this. Obviously, it's got to have to go through our board, West Fargo Events Board. But you've got a third party that isn't employed by the city of West Fargo. It's going to be making some creative suggestions and the like. And I just think that that's going to be a mess. Mr. Gjerdevig.
So from my perspective, I mean, I don't think the city really loses control. I mean, at the end of the day, if they want to shut down streets for cruise night, they're going to need city approval in order to do that at 11 in the afternoon versus 4 in the afternoon. I think the city, especially as the, primary financial contributor to West Fargo Events, maintains a lot of input and guidance and control. I agree with the comment. I don't think the city of West Fargo, by definition, should be in the event management business. We should turn that over to an event management company, which I think is more closely aligned with West Fargo Events. I totally do share the concern long-term about the amount of money that we are putting towards this on a monthly basis for managing a parking garage and all of these events and so forth. But I kind of view what, the couple of months left to come as almost a trial. Like, let's see how this goes in the next couple of months. We will revisit the West Fargo Events contract at the end of the year and can have all the more detailed conversation then with a little bit of evidence behind us as to how it works.
I just wanted to share before I moved back to this area, I worked for public relations agencies, and so I worked for a company, but we were hired by a client and held a contract with them, and they requested certain work for us, and we did it on their behalf, but I didn't work for them. I was given specific parameters, guidelines, costs, goals of what I needed to accomplish. There was full client review at all times, so I feel confident that there is a way to work this so that we remain in control and that the city of West Fargo is in control, and that West Fargo Events is fulfilling the parameters of the contract and just like when if we hire this consultant to do the pavement analysis or that we had. To me, it's the same situation where we've got someone hired to execute the work, but we're letting them know what we want to have done and giving them the parameters. So that's just to give you where my background comes from to be thinking about this, and that's how I would view it, and that's part of my time would be spent making sure that happens appropriately.
Commissioner Olson.
I just want to make a couple comments. So we basically assumed ownership of cruise night. Toppers is not associated whatsoever with it?
Toppers is the group that brings all the cars and coordinates all the cars. Melissa can describe that better than me, but it used to be Toppers that ran the car show. It was the Toppers Car Show. And it still is called the Toppers Car Show, but the city does all the work and pulls everything together. What they do is they make sure their people show up and make sure the cars are parked the way they're supposed to be parked. And otherwise, we do the rest.
Yeah, we coordinate the porta potties. We coordinating the closing of the streets. Yep. We being Mrs. Richard does all this, all the food vendors, all of those types of things, and of course, the thing that's always been amazing to me on our cruise nights is cleanup. Yeah. Because if you drive the streets at 8 o'clock the next morning, you don't even see a gum wrapper. They do an amazing job.
Yeah. Where I was going with this is, shouldn't Toppers be the one that's contracting with West Fargo Events or another one to put it on, and then they have to work with us to have security, fire, EMT, all that stuff? Just like anybody else who wants to hold a parade, that needs to get a permit, and they're the ones that are gonna do it, and the same thing for toppers, or...
I'm with you, Brad.
Mrs. Fisk had a point.
I'm
Can
sorry.
excuse me?
Yep.
All I was going to ask is that maybe if you would like some additional information or different information, maybe we could table this for tonight and bring it back to the next meeting. Just because of the late hour and there's just a lot of unknowns here, it seems like. But it's totally up to you. If you want to proceed. It was just a suggestion. If you have some directive you want to give Melissa on what information you as a group would like to see brought to you.
Thank you, Mayor, to Brad, because yes, it's a toppers event, but I will tell you what, over the years, it's a mutual partnership. We have been very successful as a community. So to go tell toppers to just take it all over, it won't work. I'm sorry.
I understand that.
So, but I mean, we're more of a partner than we are in that case. They're a mutual partner. And yeah, quite honestly, I mean, we're trying to do what we're trying to do to keep these events going, get people, keep our community involved. And that's what this is all about in reality here. So
I'm just curious how other cities do it, like Bismarck, Mandan, or Grand Forks, if they have a community event. Is it the city employees that are doing it, or is it a different entity that's doing it?
It's variable across the board. In some of the cities, you'll see like a chamber is doing it, or there's a downtown business association. Sometimes there's a nonprofit that has a specific event, and it rises to the level where there's close partnership with the city. So it's pretty variable. It's not typical for us. I would say it's not a model you see a lot the way that we have things.
You guys do what you want. I'm alone.
But
I'm going to tell you.
So it's just, it's really a decision about how you want to dedicate the staff time or how you want to fill that. I will echo Commissioner Simmons' comments, though. It's been a great partnership with toppers, and much of the success and the safety and the organization the day of really goes to toppers and the credibility they bring to it, and helping to reinforce to that community that this is a special thing that happens, and they're wonderful, and certainly enjoy working with them, and it is a great partnership, yes. But yeah, there's lots of different models for how you approach it.
Quick question. I mean, has anybody had a conversation with toppers about the transition that we're discussing?
I've brought it up that we've talked about some different ways to continue this, but not directly that it might transfer to someone else. We'd still be involved this first year, and
I mean, multiple people have talked about the value of the partnership, and I guess if that is the case, or we turn it over to somebody, if we feel that there's a need to get there.
You bring up toppers, so Jay Thomas literally just texted me, and as a member of toppers, he'd prefer we table this and continue the discussion later. And with him being part of toppers, I guess I would respect that.
Thanks, Jay, for telling us the commission what to do, but no.
And for sticking with us for 3.5 hours.
Going to poll the commission, and you guys are going to decide what we're going to do.
Right, just somebody from toppers. That was, I guess, the point.
Yeah, Rich Barnes and those people are amazing. Great people to work with.
Yeah. And again, it's more than cruise night. Obviously, West Fest is huge.
Well, there's other. Mayor, I'm going to make a motion if I can.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. I'm going to make a motion that we approve to hire in West Fargo events to run these organizations.
For a second.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Gjerdevig seconds. It's been moved and seconded that the City of West Fargo hire West Fargo events to coordinate the large City of West Fargo community events. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Olson.
That's just for the remainder of 2020, and then it'll be evaluated for
you know what? Let's do that, Commissioner Olson. With that,
I don't know if that's going to be an ongoing thing or
Melissa?
What.
We're all kind of comfortable with that.
And when we say hire, the plan is they're doing that for within the existing dollars that we're paying them.
Yep.
I can't accept that suggestion without the second's approval.
Agree.
Okay, very good. As Mr. Olson said. Is there any further discussion? Proceed to vote. All those in favor that the City of West Fargo hires West Fargo events to coordinate the large City of West Fargo community events through calendar year 2020, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Construction report, Mr. Scott. Be brief, please.
Well, thank you, Commission President Ardis, members of the Commission. Well, judging from the sound of it the last 30 minutes, I'd say all of our projects are going to be pumping some water tomorrow, cleaning up, and for fear of safety, I will move to questions.
Good job.
Attaboy. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Is there any questions for Mr. Scott?
I think you're gonna keep those diversion gates closed for a while with all the rain that's hit Cheyenne Valley.
It sounds like it's raining like Dickens outside now.
The lake at Ashtabula is up almost a foot.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mrs. Fisk, City Administrator's report.
Good evening. I will be extremely brief. I only want to tell you that for the census, the door-to-door census workers will be starting on the 30th of this month, following up on addresses that did not respond to the census. And so if you get calls or comments, just that's what they're doing. They're out and about starting the 30th to collect that additional data. And unless you have something for me, I'm done.
Questions for Mrs. Fisk?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any correspondence, Mrs. Fisk? Or any of the commissioners like to share? Any non-agenda items that would like to come forward at this time from the commissioners? A special thank you to all the staff that's still here at 9:10. Thank you. You rest assured, we will not have an agenda at this length in future meetings. We will discuss and kind of work with Emily, and we'll kind of figure out how to do this a little differently. And so, Emily, welcome to the team as the new person putting this together. But we're going to visit. So,
blame that on me.
Anything? Yeah. Well, it's been a great evening. The items that we discussed are very relevant and very important to our community and to our citizens, so no harm, no foul. So, move to adjourn.
Second.
Adjourn.